Okay, this is episode 14 of Counterpoints, and I'm Thorin, and as usual, all of my shows are sponsored by Alpha Draft, which is a fantasy esports service where you pay money. They pay me money. I mean, you can pay money to pay a fantasy esports, but then they pay me money just for looking good on camera, having a really good brand, and it actually doesn't matter how good I am at Counter-Strike. So in many ways, I feel like I'm a North American Counter-Strike pro already, you know. So I'm ready for this chat here that we're going to have. So my guests for this episode, we're going to start in the top right-hand corner, which is Hazed from CLG. And I know the key part is that I said the CLG part there, because you were like, CLG, oh, is it JDM? No, wait a second, you didn't say that. Was it Tariq? FNS? Like, no. Remove all the other names, like, you know, in the Beatles it's like John, Ringo, George Harrison, but you know there was that guy Ringo was in the band, remember, the drummer, yeah. So it's like Ringo of the Beatles but of CLG. That's how I think of you, Hazed.
I'm surprised you even knew who I was, honestly.
Okay. Do you want to? Okay, this is one of those times when I'm going to break the I'm going to reveal behind the curtain what people say when they're on analysis desks. So here's something you might enjoy, Hazed. When you were at Cluj-Napoca, you remember when everyone was sat at those sort of tables that were out front, you know, where all the players could come and each team had a table that they could sit back and watch the matches on? Yeah. When you were at one of those tables, you know, like a parlor was going around and he was interviewing people at those different tables. He was just asking them like generic questions. When you were on the mic, when you were talking, because you have like a super deep voice in American accent, Richard just turns to me and goes, "You think that guy's ever smoked weed?" And we were all just crying, laughing, because you have like the most ridiculously stereotypical like stoner voice. I'm sorry, it's just true. So there's a gem for you, mate. There's a little gem.
I don't smoke, so
okay, well, you are obliged to say that on camera. Well done. You have successfully passed Hotshot GG's test. Okay, so we'll continue round. So in the bottom right-hand corner is Moses. And I actually get the sense that the reason Moses was so eager to be on this episode is because normally he is the punching bag for NA, where it's like he's like a dartboard with a picture of the American flag on, and we just throw darts at it every single event, every broadcast. But now I get the feeling that he thinks that it's actually, he's allied with me as like an analyst, and we're going to wreck these NA pros about how lazy they are. And also, is my sense right? Are my feelers correct there, Moses?
I'm never allied with you, Duncan. I never feel safe around you. But the worst part about all that is, you know, my opinions on North American Counter-Strike, and you guys still throw the daggers. You guys still just throw me under the bus.
Well, it's not my fault you were born there, mate. Okay, so in the bottom left-hand corner, the last guest is ShahZam. And here's the thing. First of all, I'll give him some props. Just by being called ShahZam, he did give me the alley-oop that I basically slam dunk in Shaq's face, then ripped the backboard off and was like, "Get out my face, bitch," to Shaquille O'Neal, because it's just how I roll. So, but I like to think of ShahZam. See, here's the problem. Most people actually, ShahZam, you have to realize, there's a principle I always explain to people in esports, which is, if you keep in mind these demographics I once saw on like a survey done a year ago or so, it said that most people who are esports fans, most of them only got into it like 6 months ago, then maybe like 25% more got in like 9 months ago or a year ago. Most people actually haven't been fans for more than a year. That's why all these games have like exponentially gotten bigger and bigger in terms of fans. So you have to realize, ShahZam, most people only know you from like when you were in Conquest Now, and then Tempo Storm, and then maybe some of them remember like you were in Cloud9. So everyone actually only knows the sanitized ShahZam. They think you're like a nice guy, think you're really good on stream, whereas I like to think of you as the most hated North American player in the entire scene. So maybe we have a different perspective on things. How are you doing, mate?
I'm doing fine. Maybe they just know the growing up ShahZam.
Okay, maybe, yeah. Well, here's the thing. I feel like after the events of the last few days, everyone's going to be on their best behavior. Everyone's going to be really careful what they're saying, you know. So let's yeah?
I'm not looking to attend any seminars, so.
Okay.
Just public apologies.
Well, definitely not any on like putting together teams, how to maximize your talent, how to stay on top. Don't worry, mate. To be fair, you'll never have those concerns on Cloud9 again. I feel like your time came and went there, you know. Sometimes, here's the thing, ShahZam. I told this to Jack, actually. I told him, listen, I know you really loved ShahZam, but sometimes when you love something, you've got to set it free. and then what you do is you flush, and then it goes around the toilet bowl, and then you never see it again. Actually, it goes off to a sewage works, and it gets turned into something else. So that's just my thoughts. It's kind of like an English idiom that I use there, a bit like biting the bullet, and all that stuff. So okay, let's get into the topic. So the main topic actually that spurred me to want to have this discussion was. You guys, as in hazed and ShahZam, were kind of bemoaning the fact that it is kind of like a Reddit sentiment nowadays that, since North America at the moment doesn't have like an elite level team, it doesn't have a team that's like winning tournaments, a lot of people kind of don't just get sad about that, they kind of like turn on the NA pros. And so as a result, because they know that the NA pros make good money now and they have good sponsorships, they kind of try and, I've noticed even NA fans like bash on NA pros, like, they're just lazy and they just get paid so much money and they don't care about winning, and these are the sort of sentiments some people, obviously not everyone, really think. So it feels like you guys, it's not necessarily that you're like mad at that, but it can be frustrating, right, Hazed?
It's super frustrating. I mean, like, we dedicate, like, my team alone dedicates 10 hours a day to practice. So, and as when we were boot camping in Europe, that was more than most teams. So it's like, come on. It feels almost unjustified.
What do you
What
think,
you guys doing
ShahZam?
for all 10 hours?
Okay. Already, I mean, we didn't even get to go around the table. Moses has already put in his opening gambit. Okay, mate. So, hey, what are you doing for the 10 hours?
I'm coming in triggered.
That's right. Hey, don't worry. I got you. All right,
Okay.
I got you. So practice starts at 2. So it's mandatory at least watch one demo. But the demo time has to be from 2 to 3. Sometimes we do more. It just depends. So it'd be 2 to 4. So we watch demos and do individual warm-up from 2 to 4, basically, is how it works. And then once 4 hits and 4 to 5, we go into a server and we talk about anything PETA wants to talk about on certain maps, whether it's like a new strat or how he wants to change some setups, etc. It's up to him. And then from 5 to midnight, we scrim. Now, if we can actually get scrims for every hour, it would be awesome. That's like the ideal world, but we can't always get scrims. And that's where the problem lies, but we still dedicate the time. So when we're not scrimming, we try to like DM or like go into a server, talk about setups, or we try to use the time efficiently, but we'd prefer if we were scrimming.
Okay. What about you, ShahZam? How much do you think you guys practice? Obviously, here's another thing, by the way. I actually get a bit mad when I see interviews where players are like, yeah, we practice 12 hours a day. Like, no one almost anywhere in the world in any game practices 12 hours a day. You practice 12 hours a day when it's the boot camp or it's like the few weeks before the event. What's like an average day like in OpTic, ShahZam?
Yeah, so on match days, we get on at like 7 Eastern. We're all Eastern players except one of us, and we'll spend either an hour or 2 hours just in a server talking about things that we need to change, some stuff we need to go over, things aren't working, what works, watch demo together for that hour or 2 hour, depending on if we could book a scrim at that time. And then from that point on, we'll scrim to like 1 or 2 a.m., depending on how long we can book scrims. We try not to like keep like a strict like boot camp schedule and not like burn anyone out, because I know some people enjoy playing CS outside of practice as well, some don't. So it's 5 to 6 hours a night with us.
Okay. There you go, Moses. That sounds fine, right? They're practicing enough. They're watching demos. They do it. They're putting scrim blocks in. What's wrong with that, mate?
Well, like, I mean, that's all sounds great. My only thing was, like, I've told this story on another show, on a video, of JDM messaging me, like, a month ago, saying, yeah, like, now that Pete is the coach and everything, we're doing these 10 hours a day, we're watching all these demos as a team, we're doing all this stuff, and, like, that all sounded great, and then I thought about it for a second, I'm like, what took it so long? Like, why is this just now happening? Like, what's been going on all of last year?
Okay. Hazed?
I'd say the only difference from last year would be we didn't really watch demos as a team. That's the one thing that's really changed. Before we were even like on CLG, when we were just mouse pads, we were scrimming so much. We'd scrim probably 7 or 8 hours a day, which I can't say for a fact it was more than any other NA team, but I mean that's a lot of scrimming. And we'd play anyone basically just to make sure we could get scrims. It wasn't like we were trying to be picky, because back then we weren't like some like top NA team. So we'd play anyone. So we always had scrims, and we did it about 7 or 8 hours. if you watch demos, you did it individually, and it wasn't like required. But now it's required.
When you say watch demos, do you mean like you watch just top teams in general, or your own demos, like your own matches, your own scrims you played?
If we watch our own demos, it's usually as a team. So like we have a TV in our room, and we'll put it up on the TV, and then Peter will go over it, and we'll talk about like what he wants to see different. And a lot of times we know our own mistakes in the game. We don't even have to review the demo. We can see it. Like we say it immediately in the match. We're like, oh, that was stupid. Why did we do that? And we talk about it and try and fix it on the spot. But if it's like for example, like if I'm going to be entry fragging, I want to watch like Apex demos because I want to see how he entry frags, or I want to watch like Dupree demos because they're two totally different entry fraggers. So I want to see like the styles, how they do it, and stuff like that. But yeah, team demos are usually watched as a team, but individual demos are obviously by ourselves.
I mean, just for people who are like fans of Counter-Strike, but they don't know what goes on behind the scenes, I'll tell you right now, most European teams aren't watching team demos of their own games and stuff. But obviously, if those teams are on top, they have like a luxury to do that. They can get away with doing that, some of them. Like, for example, I'll give you a great example, Envious. Some of those players have never even watched a game of their own, Like, they've never watched that game. Like, they hope the in-game leader tells them something. But we can obviously see that Envious have a massive amount of luxury in terms of mad talent. They can maybe get away with that. So the key thing, I think, for NA is, if there's some sort of a gap between you and the European, you have to figure out things you can do to bridge the gap in some way. Does your team watch demos at all, ShahZam? Do you have anything extra you do beyond just scrimming to try and bridge the gap?
Yeah. So in terms of watching our own matches, every time we play a match, win or lose, we watch together that same night. We just have one person broadcast it to the rest of us, and we don't really look at the demos for like individual mistakes or anything, because people usually know what mistakes they're making. It's more of like understanding where our setups went wrong and what the other teams did right against us, and kind of like figure out how to fix that. In terms of watching other teams' demos, in terms of like preparation or bringing strats to the table, that's something more people do on their own time earlier in the day. Like mostly Stan and Daps, I know, are like the big part of like those guys are just watching demos of teams we're about to play. They create like little notebooks, I guess, or documents of all the teams that we expect to play in an event, and they like present strats to the table. Sometimes we'll see something cool, like NAF will see something G2 does, and he'll be like I think this could be really implemented well to our playbook. And then in that like 1 or 2 hours at the start, he will like explain it and show us, and then that's what we'll do.
So at least in terms of like the resources you have right now, the amount of hours you have in a day, I mean, obviously, like I say, it would be unreasonable actually to expect anyone to play Counter-Strike for 12 hours a day. That would burn someone out for sure. Do the NA teams, at least your teams, the teams that you know about Hazed, do they at the moment do like all the things they should do as pros? Is this like a good like a well-rounded approach for people who are professionals at a video game?
It's hard for me to speak for the other teams because I honestly don't know their schedule. Like, I didn't know what OpTic's schedule was until ShahZam just told me. All I know is of our schedule, and I know that teams are scrimming very often, but I have no idea if they watch demos or anything like that. I just know about my team.
But in general, this notion of like, oh, they're lazy or whatever, this is obviously not the case in your opinion.
Well, it's not okay. So here's my stance on it. It's more like they pretend like we don't care, and that's not true. We care. We truly care, and I think their expectations of us is like you said, they want us to practice like 12 hours a day.
Okay. No, I think you've hit on something there, actually. Like, it's like what I joked. Like, I obviously was referencing that meme in my opening, which is that people really think, okay, that like Cloud9, for example, famously, they think of them for like a year and a half. They're like, oh, they only care about their brand and being streamers, and they don't really. They almost make it sound like they only play to still be a big name to get to then stream and get all the money in sponsorships and whatnot. Which obviously, even if someone did think cynically like that, they wouldn't go 100% that way and just be like, oh, I don't care about the matches at all. So even if there was a grain of truth in it, it's obviously being exaggerated a bit, right?
Mm-hmm. It's grossly exaggerated because. A good example is like a lot of us, especially me, because I'm fairly old in terms of like the pro CS player. I didn't when I started and when I tried to like go pro originally, it was in 1.6. It was never about the money. The money wasn't even a part of it. It was just I wanted to compete. Like I wanted to be at these lands. I wanted people to like look up to me and be like, holy shit, he's so good. But
Okay. Well, you got the first two.
I mean, yeah.
Competing, you're at those lands. You know. There's still goals to go for.
There's still goals, Duncan. But money just happened to like come into the picture and make it more like accessible. So I didn't have to have a full-time job while I was doing it, because that's how I started in CS:GO. I started a year late, and I was like, you know what? Why not? Why don't I just give this a try? And I went like full bore for a year with a full-time job where all I did was eat, sleep, go to work, and then when I got home, I played CS. I didn't do anything for a year, but that. So it's like when people start attacking, I'm not gonna say everyone in NA was like that, but when they like group me together with it, or think that all of us are just like some lazy pieces of shit, like I'm gonna get angry about it, because we clearly tried and all of us put a shitload of effort to get where we're at. And I just think it's super unfair that they say stuff like that.
So Moses, are there any NA pros? Do you think that, in any sense, do you think that way? Like they don't put 100% focus on being pros, so they just want to be whatever, successful, good branding or whatever. Do you think, is that exaggerated? Do you think there are some people who like that? Have you unmuted yourself, you fucking cretin as fool?
No.
Okay,
I was
hello.
thinking.
Oh, right. Oh, my bad. I didn't know you ever did that. Okay.
Jesus. I mean, I'm sure there are.
Okay.
It's yeah. I mean, there definitely are. There are people who are just in this for the money. For
is it a problem though in the NA scene? Is it just like the odd person? Is it other teams?
I don't think it's something that I worry about in like a team like Liquid, Cloud9, CLG. Probably OpTic. I think for the most part, the top teams are not. I don't see any one of those teams that I worry about in that sense, in any way.
Okay. So then you're not worried.
I've never had an issue with like, I know, because I know the players, and I know from talking to them and from competing against them that everyone wants to be good, and I know everyone's putting in the time to do it. I'm just more concerned about like nothing's changed. It's been over a year now, right, and nothing's changed. Like, so that either tells me, one, that they don't know how to practice efficiently. They don't know how to practice the right way to improve. My biggest question for these teams is, who holds you guys accountable? Because when I watch a team like Tempo Storm come in, the second best Brazilian team, and body every North American team on their way to stealing a berth out of the region, well, maybe not stealing is the wrong word, but taking it out from underneath you guys. It's like they didn't fully outskill you guys. They didn't fully it wasn't a matter of tactics. It was a matter of they didn't make as many mistakes. Like, I don't understand why there's so many mistakes that still come out in North American CS when everyone's, talking about how they know what they did wrong. Like, who holds you guys accountable in practice to say, stop fucking making the same mistake over and over?
ShahZam. Has it been the same for 1 year? Is it true what he says, that nothing's changed?
Yes and no. Like, the results have been the same. But I do, like, as a player in North America, like the whole practice, the quality of practice, the way teams approach actually playing CS and being a team has completely changed over the last year. Teams are definitely like way more structured. There's a lot more emphasis in like teamwork and just organization overall, and like a lot more discipline amongst teams. Before, it was like a year ago, it was pretty bad. It was just people making plays individually and just outskilling the other team. There's definitely like in the top North American teams, there's definitely like a tactical difference now.
Okay, Moses, let me ask you then as a counterpoint. You say like nothing's changed. So, okay, here's the thing. If we isolate only the top NA teams, so we just only look at Liquid, CLG, C9, okay, sure, nothing's really changed as much as, like, even if they had good periods during the year, they have kind of fluctuated back to where they were roughly in terms of the international scene. But doesn't the fact that ShahZam's in this chat and his team's like now, whatever, considered like third or fourth best NA team, I mean, some of those players were non-factors on the international level before. So hasn't the scene to some degree improved a little bit?
They're still non-factors on the international scene. Like when they go to an international event, do we think they're going to be getting top 4? Do we think they're going to be getting what's the upset potential there? Like, we still have roster changes every season. We still have teams who don't have deep map pools, so it doesn't even if they are able to take one map, that's the only map they can take off an international team. We still have inconsistency where a team like look at ShahZam's team just as an example. I mean, when they were Conquest, they went to that SIVO. They had some good results. You guys beat, what was it, Dignitas, or was it the AZ Dignitas?
Yep.
And then you go out west to play against only North American teams and get bodied out of a tournament in the group stages. And then you guys go to CS. You guys beat CSGL to get into E League, and then you come then to the qualifiers, the minor, and you guys get bodied out by Splice. Like, this is like the consistency issue. Like, yeah, they change when everything's going right. It looks better when everything's going good for you guys, but there's still just like the next week, it's a completely different team that we see. And that screams to me just still a huge reliance on individual performances, because when that individual doesn't perform, all of a sudden your team is not impactful whatsoever. And that's not just to isolate your team. I think that's a key issue with CLG at times. I think it's a key issue with Cloud9 for sure.
What do you think, ShahZam?
Well, I mean, like our run at ZEVO as Conquest, and that run was a lucky run. Like we were still like a relatively new team at the LAN. That was our first LAN as a team. It was a lucky run. Everyone was hitting their shots. We were a lot more on the fly. We did a lot of prep on the team, but we didn't really have a lot of depth as a team. So going into like the AWPer LAN the week after, we lost 2 maps when we were out of the tournament. We got pretty destroyed, and then we're like I can say as my team, like we're a completely different team now than the team at SIVO LAN or the team at the AWPer LAN or even ESA LAN. Like we went to the minor as favorites. It was our first tournament as favorites, and we were on like a 16 match win streak online against all those teams. We never lost to an enemy GG. We never lost to a Splice online. We never lost to a Winter Fox. And then we go to that LAN and like. We go to the lane doing the same thing that's been working for us before, and like we never really thought to change anything. We never really thought to like just actually put some extra effort. We're just doing what was working. It's not like, I don't want to say it's complacency, but it was like we were afraid to like fix what's not broken. But in that sense, we kind of screwed ourselves. And so it's not like we go to that event. We're like, okay, let's go to the next event and just do the same things and hope it works this time and hope we get lucky. Like definitely gone over what we did wrong, and like. I want to say that there won't be a repeat performance like that, but I mean, that's the way it is. NACS, like we're constantly playing against each other, like, and teams are just familiar with each other as well.
Yeah, but so are the Europeans, and we kind of have a good indication of who's going to beat who over there outside of like the top 3 or 4 teams. And even then, you can still make reasonable assumptions on how maps are going to go.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I mean, you can make those reasonable assumptions, like. In NA, we were favorites for the minor. We were favorites for the last chance qualifier, and we lost. And, I mean,
okay, so Duncan, is this triggering you too? This is all I'm hearing in this is like, remember when like you always bring it up when AWPer used to go over and like body every European team in scrims going into this event, and they were like undefeated in scrims, and then they come into the event and just get crushed. I think that's the exact same thing as this like 16-0 streak, though. Like the mentality has to change.
Okay, I've got a question then. Okay, along those lines, does that mean is there still any issue with practice? Because there's a famous thing that used to be a problem in NA, which is it was like the worst story ever. It's like the most terrible excuses. Like if you spoke to back then, it was complexity. It wasn't Cloud9, and it was iBuyPower, and those 2 teams were the only good NA teams. And all they used to say was like, "Oh, in practice, it's not even like real practice. People just like run around and play scrimmy and just try to like headshot each other and just try to like beat the other team basically, and no one's really practicing." Like. Is there any of that still exists? I mean, if you're beating a team 16 times in a row and then they beat you at the LAN, what's different from the online practice to the LAN practice, ShahZam?
In terms of practice alone, yeah, there is. With the top teams, like there isn't. You play LG in a scrim, you play C9 in a scrim. CLG is a great scrim partner. Like they play discipline, they like actually practice. But then you play like some of the lower tier teams, and once they start losing like 10 rounds, they start just running around and pretty much like give up. They start pushing everything. You can't really get quality practice out of them. So the thing about the 16 match win streak online and then going to the event is the fact that we got complacent with like our CT sides were, and we just continued with what was working for us until it didn't work. Like, okay, we didn't think to change anything until it failed. You get what I'm saying?
So, okay, to tie into the point before, like the notion that people think that NA is lazy, or what Moses had said, like nothing's changed in a year, and then the idea that people think, oh, they just do it for streaming, etc. One of the real issues you have to tie in is that the public thinks that all the NA pros make really good money now. And in the context of what NA used to get last year and 2 years before, obviously they do. Like now you make a proper salary, etc. But okay, let me put it this way. In that recent interview with Astralis, Device said that he makes like $9,130 a month salary or something. And I saw on Hazed's Reddit account that he said Hazed makes $3,000 a month salary. If you had to guess, ShahZam, where are most of the NA top teams between these 2 points? Like NA 9,000 as the top end, 3,000 as where Hazed is. Are nearly all the top teams around Hazed's level or above?
They're all around like Hazed's salary and like maybe plus or minus 1 or 2K. Like it's I don't know any NA team over 5K a month. Like it's all around there, and like people could say like it is a lot of money compared to before, and it's not like an excuse. It's like there's a lot of money, but it's not our fault. We shouldn't say like, no, we don't deserve this, we suck. Like
sure, yeah,
we're gonna take it because you're worth like the market value, like how much you're worth. And these sponsors are like giving these orgs money to get English speaking CSGO teams, and that's like, so yeah, we get paid more than Tempo Storm gets paid. Like, and so the thing is that okay, I'm losing my train of thought here. So oh my god.
Just reel it back in, mate. It was about the notion that people think if you get paid that much, then like the excuse, like they think that's not an excuse anymore. Like, you know, you get paid that much, you should have results, or you should be really dedicated, or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah, you can, like, the orgs can supply the teams with like an analyst staff, like a coach, everything they need. But just simply pouring in more money isn't going to make the teams better. Like, teams in esports are paid by how popular they are. In all honesty, like, you're not paid for how good you are. You're paid for what kind of return.
Or how popular the Call of Duty team is.
Yeah, like, but the thing is that, dude, I can't even think of a word. I lost my train of thought.
Okay, listen, look back on it. Okay, Hayes, let me put it this way. Did you yourself... Okay, when you said there when you were Mouse Spaz, before you joined CLG, when you were Mouse Spaz and you were playing all these hours of the day, but people like Cloud9, at the time Cloud9 weren't having very good results, actually that was when they were in the slump. New players weren't really integrated into the lineup and all that. So at the time they were having their problems. Did you actually, at that point in time, think in your own head what a lot of people used to think in the NA scene, like, oh, if I had like the full-time salary that the best player in the world has, and I had all these things like a team house or analyst or coach or whatever, you know, then like that, then I would be really like, I'd be at my max potential, I'd be super good, I'd be as good as these guys. Was that ever anything you thought?
Before I started practicing like as much, like 7 or 8 hours a day, yeah, because when I first started, I think I was only scrimming like maybe like 3 or 4 hours. And so I had that mindset. But once I started playing a lot, it was never like, yeah, I never thought of it that way. I just always said the best teams and like the best players are going to win. I've never thought about the money ever, honestly.
Because Moses, okay, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So Moses, we've heard that excuse though before all the NA teams got the good salaries. Basically, like back when the NA, here's the thing: back in the complexity days, they didn't even have a salary, or they had a very low one. AWPer guys, I think, didn't have a salary because they gave it up to try and get more sticker money or something. So basically, was talking really about 2015 when all the NA teams, all the top ones, got like a proper salary, and then late 2015 is where you expand it even further. And you're talking like maybe 10 teams that have salaries, and it's all pretty good. You must have heard, like I heard, Moses, a million times the excuse before everyone got the salary that's the key thing the NA teams would always go to, right? It would always be like, well, how can you expect us to be as good as like, to give you an example, let's say Fnatic, because, you know, I'm not paid to play as a full-time pro and I don't have all these time, I'm going to school as well. Like, this was a common excuse, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then once they got the salaries, it was the team houses was the next one.
Okay. So what do you think on this issue? What is your thoughts on this topic? Because obviously now they do get the money, right?
I mean, I think there's a certain amount of truth in that. Like, if you can play this game, if you can be full time, but if you're not able to succeed initially, you know, when you're not getting a salary, all that stuff has to be earned. And if you're not able to find ways to succeed, you know, I mean, TSM, the ex-TSM, Astralis, those guys were all graduating school, like studying. Who is it that just got their masters in the midst of them becoming the #1 team in the world at the time? Like, you can do it if you really want to do it and you apply yourself, and then everything comes from that. You're not supposed to get the money and then achieve that status. You're supposed to achieve that status, get the money, and that makes it easier for you to move forward and improve even farther than you could. I mean, it shouldn't be required that you get a salary to become good enough to be a professional team.
Okay, so here's the thing, Moses. You've been questioning all these guys. I'm going to put the question to you. Give me the top 2 reasons, Moses' top 2 reasons that hold NA back from being as good as we're imagining it's possible to be with this sort of resources, this player base, all the rest of it. What would your top 2 that you'd isolate be as the 2 best reasons as to why they're held back, or what's preventing them from doing so?
I think a big one is going to be mentality of during practice, the mentality that you need to be playing like you're playing in a championship match at all times, even if it's just like in an FPL game. Okay. And then I think the other big one is respect for the other teams and the other players that you're competing against in North America. I think there's a huge disconnect where, when you talk about these teams who just turn scrimmy, like you can never have that mindset, because who else gets scrimmy is Envy and Fnatic at times. They get real scrimmy. That shit works in CSGO. So if you can't beat North American teams when they're getting scrimmy, I think you have to approach that like, okay, so this just happened to us. And regardless of what we think about it in terms of it's a good player or a bad play, we need to respect the fact that it beat us. And how are we going to prevent that in the future? No matter what you think of that player, you can't just give yourself that excuse of them being scrimmy. And I think a lot of teams do that.
Anyone want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think he's right for the most part, especially with the scrimmy thing. It's really looked down upon, but when you look at all the really top teams, specifically Envy and Fnatic, like you said, they're the difference between scrimmy and NA and scrimmy in Europe is that scrimmy in Europe, they do it together, but like in NA, someone does it by themselves. I think that's the biggest difference. I also think one more thing, and it's like a deep-seated problem, which I don't know that. I mean, maybe it can be fixed, but I think stats kind of like really messed up the mentality of North American players. Okay. Because whenever, this is from personal experience too on CLG, like as an entry fragger, or like when your caller says, I want you to rush something, like through a smoke, through a molly, through a flash, no matter what, we're rushing this. As an entry fragger, I know I'm supposed to go through it. But then I expect everyone to also go with me, because that was the call. Like my job is to be the vanguard, and then everyone back me up. But sometimes I don't get backup, and I think it's because it's like a they're not consciously thinking like, fuck, my stats might be bad. Like if I'll just die and I'll do nothing. That's not what they consciously think, but I think subconsciously that's what's happening. Is like they don't want to commit to something they know might not be good for them statistically, but it could win a round for the team, even if it's a low chance. So they'd rather try and do something, that benefits just them rather than the team. And I think that's like a deep-seated problem, and I see it in FPL too. Obviously, FPL is a little more like, scrimmy, like a little crazy. People don't really play as serious sometimes. So, but I notice it in almost every pro that I play with.
Have you brought that up in your team practices?
Yes, it is the one thing that I have been very upset about. If there's one thing that I have complained about a lot, it is that I have made it very well known that they need to commit, like just commit to stuff, and it'll work out. And maybe you won't win the round, but it'll be so much better if I die or someone dies and then it gets traded, rather than, at least there's a chance you can trade it. Whereas if I go by myself, there is no trade. You're just hoping I just totally destroy this guy, which, I mean, maybe you have confidence in me, sure, but like that's not the right way to play, in my opinion.
What do you think, ShahZam?
I can see where he's coming from with that. I feel like that's more of like a unique case though, like stats culture wise. I think a really big problem is just having like players having discipline and being well rounded. Like that might also come off of like the lack of like good leaders in NA. Like you need someone that can just direct people, and there needs to be players that are willing to listen to that person and just do what they say, regardless of like if they agree with it or not. Just having everyone on the same page, and it's just like a really big lack of true leaders in NA. There are people that can sit there and call strats, but there aren't people that can direct other players. You get what I'm saying?
Okay, so here's what's weird then, because that's an area where, like, obviously you're not saying that as an excuse, but that's just like a fact. Like there aren't enough of those sorts of leaders. But that's actually quite strange if you think about it, because actually, if you think of any other country, and all the top CS countries have like 1 or 2 leaders that are quite good at this sort of aspect. NA obviously has a way bigger player base of pros, and so you'd think with everyone being able to speak English, there should be more leaders like this. But actually, when you're saying like that, I'm not even isolating it to the lower level people. Almost every NA leader I can think of doesn't have like a authoritative voice like that. Like I think, for example, of even Sean Gares. Okay, Sean Gares is a good tactician. Is he like a really decisive leader who like puts people's feet to the fire? Not really. That was one of the old problems in C9. It felt like, and they think of someone like Daps, for example, okay? So Daps literally like let people take the in-game leadership away from him. He's been kicked from teams where he's the in-game leader. Yet as an actual tactician, he seems okay. It never seemed like he had any problem in that area, but he's maybe not the most forceful person with his opinion. Adren, we've just seen get kicked out of Team Liquid. He's another guy where maybe he called the tactics, but it doesn't feel like he was the emotional leader of the team or whatever. FNS is obviously off CLG now. Cutler's an in-game leader, but you can see it doesn't feel like he's like a real... He's not like the quarterback type guy. What do you think on this topic, Hayes? Because it's true, I can't really think of many. In fact, the only one I can think of is Dazed. Everyone just said he was an asshole. Now he's banned from the game.
Yeah, Dazed was an amazing leader. He's not afraid to call people out on like mistakes, which is good. You need that. You really need someone that can do that. But I guess on the flip side is you need players who are willing to like sit there and listen to it, which is really rare, honestly. I think there are a lack of leaders, and I never really thought about it until ShahZam brought it up just now. He's right. Honestly, there aren't very many like good leaders. There's strat callers, but not very many leaders. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, Hayes. If you really are someone who's bothered by stuff like you're saying, like the deep-seated problem of people like essentially baiting or just being unwilling to commit themselves to like the team concept over like what happens individually to them in the round, and you can see in your team, maybe we have the strats, we don't have this, why doesn't someone like you become a leader? Why don't you become like the guy who enforces that shit?
Well, I'd actually entertained the idea a while back. This was months ago. Sometime last year, where I said I wouldn't mind becoming like the strat caller and leading the team. It kind of got shut down, and instead they went with Cutler, which I mean it's fine. I think Cutler does a fine job at strat calling, so I wasn't really like opposed to it, but it was more like the team just didn't want to do it, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna force them to let me, who's never truly strat called, suddenly start strat calling at like live events. Like I understand why they don't want to do that. It makes sense. But I mean, like I can give maybe examples where like I've talked to specifically Tarek in particular when he first joined the team. Like I really tried to make him understand like how trading works, because at first he was like just like a pug star. He never really wanted to like, run in first or anything like that. But the Tarek today is not afraid to run in. He's the one guy that I can truly rely on to run in with me no matter what. He does not care what his score is at the end of the game. He wants to win. So he's like one example of someone I really worked with on that, on like not being afraid and trying to show them like a better way of playing CS sometimes.
Okay. Did you have a point you wanted to jump in on, Moses?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to touch on the fact that, I mean, the reason why Dazed was a good leader is because he held people accountable. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, sometimes even to the detriment when it happened during a live match. But if you go into a practice and Dazed told you to learn something and you don't know it at that practice, he's going to freak the fuck out. And I guarantee you come in the next day and you know it. Or you change that behavior. And that's what North American teams are missing. Like, you guys don't need tacticians. Like, even you just talked about when you wanted to be, when we asked about why didn't you become that leader, you go straight to strat calling. It doesn't need to be strat calling. Someone needs to be the voice of that team who's going to hold everyone accountable for becoming better players, making sure there is that discipline. Like, how many times, like, situationals, North American teams are awful in like 3v3s, 3-on-3s, 2-on-2s. The post plant situations are awful because there's no discipline in how individuals play. And I haven't seen that ever improve because there's no leader that's like, this is a dumb fucking play, stop making it right now. Like, there just doesn't seem to be anyone who's going to ensure that their teammates like learn that this is a bad play.
ShahZam, how can that be? I mean, here's the thing. The culture in NA, which has always existed, is that normally if someone plays bad, like, no one has a problem talking shit to the other team when they're playing bad. How can it be within teams that no one's willing to, like, call each other out or not, or even not in like it's not like you're calling a guy out to show him up, you know, but just like ensure that, like, listen, in our team we have this sort of a culture and you have to do things this way and this is our identity as a team. And, you know, why is that a problem, do you think?
So in my personal experience, like, I've played with a lot of different players and a lot of different teams, and there's kind of like way where players are like really sensitive, and it depends on how you approach it when you talk to your teammate. Like, it's all about how you say it as well. Like, you can talk to a player and you say like if you say, why did you do this, sometimes they'll take it as like a personal attack on them, or I don't know if it's their ego or something, but regardless of what the topic is, they will take it as a personal attack instead of really taking in what's being talked about, like what the play was, what should have happened. And that's like kind of, I'd say that's like a respect thing. And like, you know, if someone they think they're like, that's not a leader, they don't look to as a leader, is telling them something, they won't take it as someone that they respect, that's someone that could discipline them like a real leader. And so, like, I mean, teams just need someone that the players can look to as a leader, that can not just call strats, make strats, whatever, like, that can just like discipline the players and tell them like you did this wrong here and this is what you should have done. That's it. Like,
so the funny thing is, I actually always thought that was a problem. Dazed had it on the other side. I always felt like he needed a translator. Like, what he needed to do was tell whatever he needed to do to, like, the translator, and then the translator would say to the team, like, guys, I just really need you to hold the banana next time and not push up so aggressively. Whereas instead, he would be like, God, why would you do that? Like, why? Use your head, man. Like, your aim. What are you doing, man? Like, when that's what would trigger the fuck out of those teammates, you know? So maybe he needed that aspect, but...
Yeah, like, it's about how you say it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But it's about how you say, like, Daze was a great leader. He knew how to make people accountable, just like Moses said. The thing about him was that, standing behind AWPer when they played and stuff, is that he would make people shut down the way in live matches, with the way he would approach it. Like, he would berate them. He would make Scon not say a word for the rest of the match. Like, there's a way you have to go about with it. It's hard to find that balance.
To me, when you say, when we talk about like why is there no one holding people accountable, and you said some people are just fragile, there's two things that I think of. One, first of all this discussion about salary that you guys make, I don't think the money should be going towards, like, that shouldn't make you guys like better players. It shouldn't necessarily make you better, like, practice harder or more, but it should make you set aside personal issues for the better of the team. So that, like, some people are fragile shit, people need to get over that. Two, like, this just goes back, and you're going to have personal experience in this, ShahZam, is all of these players that are on teams with each other now, like, at some point fucking hated each other. Like, tell me, you and fucking Semphis used to go at each other. I know Semphis and Warden used to fucking hate each other and probably still do from time to time. I mean, what is it? How do you go from like verbally, publicly battling Semphis on Twitter, Reddit, forums, whatever it might have been, in games, to being on a team with him? And then how are you going to have respect for that teammate when that's been going on? Like, how do you set that shit aside?
I don't think me and Semphis' case is really like a good example, because it wasn't really ever a personal thing. Like, there was literally zero problem with me and Semphis. We actually became really good friends while we were on C9. So okay. I can't really say that was a good example of that. But I mean, like, I went from, like, you know, me and Rix, we very obviously were not fond of each other, and then I ended up playing on a team with him. I got to know him. Like, at the end of the day, everyone's human beings. Like, anyone can play with anyone. I don't think that there's any problems with any top NA teams with players not respecting each other as human beings or players. I'd like to think that's not a problem, but It's more of a I don't know what to say.
So even if it's not a personal issue,
go ahead.
Even if it's not a personal issue, like if you're talking shit to someone about how they're playing a game, and and like how you think they're bad and how you think they make stupid decisions, and then a month later you're on a team with them, like that just comes down to that respect thing. If you're not showing them respect as an opponent for how they play, doesn't even have to be personally. Like, how do you ever expect to have that respect in the future when you're teammates? Like how that doesn't translate. That's why there's this huge respect issue in North America that needs to change.
Yeah, it does feel like every NA team hates every other NA team in a way. Players do need to like respect other teams more, I guess. I can't really speak off personal experience. There's not like I can't say now. Like back then, me and Cephas would like say stuff about how I played, and like I was kind of aware of the way I was playing in a sense. And when I joined a team with Cephas, I was pretty much just like, okay, like show me the right way.
Okay. See, I've got an idea, Moses, because you know when sometimes, this is a middle management secret, sometimes when you join a company and you've got like new recruits or people who are coming into the office, what you do is you arrange for some sort of team bonding exercise. Okay, maybe you go whitewater rafting or something. So what I think happened was when they added like ShahZam into the team, they were like, right, well, we're going to Katowice next week. So what we should all do is find like a new experience that we can all experience together. And then in doing so, that'll really bond us for a long time to come. Anyway, that wasn't a real point, obviously. So here is the real point now. So, on this particular topic, so ShahZam just said there, it's kind of true that every NA team sort of hates every other NA team. Now, here's the thing, Hazed. Naively, I would have said CLG might be exempted from this, because I'm thinking of famous examples of everyone hates ShahZam, probably the name of a forthcoming TV show one day. I'm thinking of Freakazoid just like ripping on Elysian Team Liquid out of nowhere on that one time on Twitter, you know. But I would have thought naively maybe CLG's exempted from this. But I don't know if that works, because here's the problem, Hazed. You remember when this Tempo Storm team beat, I think it was Team Liquid. They beat Team Liquid, and all of a sudden JDM and a few other people like rushed to quickly be like, oh yeah, oh look at Brazil, like oh look at these Twitch chats here, yeah, oh go Brazil, yeah go Brazil. It feels like saying go Brazil is the new passive aggressive way to be like, in brackets, get shit on other NA team, haha, you lost to a Brazil. Felt like that's what was going on there, mate. Just my read, mate. What do you think?
That's not what's happening.
Oh,
I swear on everything that the reason at least CLG is so friendly to the Brazilians is because Luminosity, we're such good friends with them ever since Katowice of last year. We hung out with them, and they were just really nice people. Like we never really interacted with international teams because that was our first really big international event. So they were like the first team to like approach us, and yeah, we were just they were really nice. And so whenever Tempo Storm came over, or they were Gamers Academy then, or Games Academy, I think, we would just naturally like, you know, they since Luminosity accepted us, the new Tempo Storm accepted us. So like we were just automatically friends. That's just the way it worked. So it's not like I swear it's not that way. I will not say that resentment doesn't exist. Resentment does exist. It happens all the time, especially after scrims. I'm not going to say who, you know.
Okay, so listen, you don't have to
said.
name names, but put it this way:
Yes.
does CLG have any of these issues? Like, does CLG have like sometimes an over enthusiastic rivalry with other teams, and would they like to see Team X lose in the semi-finals of a tournament or get wrecked by this European team?
Yes, and there is a team that we would always like to see lose, and I'm not going to say me in particular thinks this way.
Okay.
But as a collective, as the team, yes, it is that way.
Mainly just Tarek and JDM, yeah, okay.
I'm not going to.
I'll translate for you, mate. It's okay. I'm putting the subs on this one, so
because I've always been the person that wants NA to succeed. Not really like I just want to see NA stop getting shit on.
Well,
honestly.
the key thing there is here's the difference there, Hazed. Okay, I'll just explain it for you. So the reason why people like Hiko, and let's say Nitro, we'll just throw him in, Hiko, Nitro, Tariq, Jedi. The reason why they have this real rivalry with the others is because they want to succeed themselves, but they don't want the others to succeed. Whereas what you've intelligently figured out is what every NA player needs to understand. You understand you're never going to be the best NA player, so you need the water level of NA to rise, and you will rise naturally with it. So, see, it's a good principle, right? If everyone gets better, you will be better in context.
But have I gotten better, Duncan?
Well, yeah, because I remember an event called MLG Aspen, and I saw you play in this tournament, mate, and it's gotten better. Listen, things are getting better. Don't you think so? Things have improved?
I had a movie clip in that, didn't I? Success!
A movie?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
That's silver lining, right?
Okay. What do you think, ShahZam? What is the problem here? Like is it? Well, here's the thing. Obviously, cultural differences will always exist. Like, you can't expect, for example, North Americans to be like Swedes, because, for example, people from Poland aren't like Swedes. People from France aren't like Swedes. These are different cultures. Will there always be this like animosity or a little bit of friction between the NA teams?
Yeah, honestly, I think it'll always be like that. We're all competitors. We're competing against each other. You're not gonna like everyone, and I mean, it's not like you hate everyone. Like, some teams are quite obviously close friends with other teams, and some people on other teams obviously don't like other teams. And it's got to be like, it's okay not to like a team or the people on the team or whatever, but you have to like respect them as players in a sense. Is I think what Moses wanted to say is you have to respect the other teams. Like, you might not like a Team Liquid or something, but you have to respect them because it's a good team, and you can take stuff from playing against them. You can take stuff from watching them. Yeah,
Sure.
I think that's what he was trying to tackle.
So, okay, here's the question then. So what this leads into is another famous kind of like theme that people think at least exists in North America. Now it exists as this new contractual version, which is because of contracts and buyouts, it's very hard to put together certain players on certain teams. Okay, we all understand that. But in the past, the perception was it was always super hard anyway because people didn't want to play with this guy or people wouldn't join Team X. Does that still exist at all, do you think, ShahZam?
I don't think so. I think that if players actually wanted to succeed, they would put aside differences or like whatever past differences they had to like play on a team together. I think back then it might have made a difference and it might have existed because there weren't contracts involved and stuff, and there weren't as many like stakes involved. People were okay with where they were at back then more than now. Like, there's a lot more about being the best team in NA now. Okay. And so now, like, I mean, now contracts have become like a huge thing where like players that would potentially be playing on a team if they weren't contracted can't, like, I mean, like Cloud9 couldn't get anyone they wanted because their buyouts were too high. They got Stewie 2K.
Yeah, that's a good thing, right? Yeah. They got Stewie 2K though. So yeah, you're right. It got saved in the end, so it all ended well. Yeah, okay. So, Moses, what do you think on this topic?
About this buyout topic, or about players not wanting to play with each other and
buyout,
new teams?
I think the two are linked together in some ways because it's easy now. Like come on, man, that's the problem with the excuse, isn't it? Before it was like, oh, they won't play each other, and then like the second everyone has buyouts, it's because of the buyouts we can't play together. Like, oh, that's convenient, isn't it? Still haven't made any great teams. Oh, good one.
I mean, I think it's all just connected. I think part of it now, I think a lot of the older players, like the old guard from like when I was playing, I mean, I call them old guard, but it was like 2014. I think a lot of them are just starting to realize that there's this new crowd coming up. And I think a lot of teams are pushing to get a little bit younger, trying to discover the next talent. Yeah, probably because of buyouts now. I think there is a little bit of truth to that, but I just think that, I think that there's personal issues that are holding teams back, and I think players are insane to deny. Like when ShahZam says that that's not an issue, like him and Cephas playing together, I think that's insanity. I think there's definitely some disconnect, and maybe not in that case. Maybe, I don't know the relationship between Cephas and you, but there are players out there that definitely hated each other at one point, and they might get on a team because they want that salary, because if they don't take it, they're going to be on a team and they're going to be making $1,000 less. And they just are just thinking, I'm just going to put up with this guy and make it work. And you can't do that.
What do you think, hazed? Is it a problem?
I don't think it's a huge problem, but I do think it exists. I'm definitely not going to deny that. for sure exists. Like I said, I can only speak from my own personal experience, and I've been okay to play with anyone. So I don't know.
Well, this
Moses.
is Richard Stoner. Of course, he's going to be okay to play with anyone.
Okay, I see what it is. Yeah, man, whatever. Yeah, just hop in the silver.
He's
yeah,
just
shit,
so baked all the time. He's got no
Okay,
problems.
yeah.
It's like just
Fuck
bring
y'all.
some Doritos over to the team and we'll be
just
good.
like, try this banana bread, man. It's spiritual. Okay, anyway.
Have you
So-
ever had fruit?
Okay, Moses, I've got a question for you. ShahZam thinks it isn't a problem. People will play with anyone. If we could get, okay, let's say we had like a draft like they have in the NFL, okay, like a combine where you just see like the skills of the person and they get like they run the 100 meters and they jump the high jump and whatever the fuck they do. And the idea is you're just seeing like the raw physical stats that someone has and then you're trying to gauge from that along with like the games you watched of them whether they'd be a good fit for your team. And actually a lot of GMs in American sports really do go by their stats like that. They can go, right, well I need a wide receiver who's like this, I'll get that person, or I need like a power forward in basketball. So okay, if we did one of those, okay, but we removed the nameplate and so you couldn't see what the name of the player was, you could just see what they were doing in the game. Am I naive in thinking that if no one knew his past and no one knew his name, ShahZam would be on a better team than he's on now? What do you think, Moses?
Yeah.
Like we just
I
saw
think he would
5
be.
maps of him AWPing on CT side and then a few get rounds of him with an AK. Like he would be on like Team Liquid or he'd be on CLG or something.
Yeah, I definitely think that. I mean, you could see that in Cloud9. I mean, that's a team where they saw some potential, and they said, I mean, it's that situation where there's a lot of talent in ShahZam, and he makes some mistakes at times. But yeah, definitely, if you take his name off the plate, I think, you know, I won't even sugarcoat this, and I'm sorry if this offends you, but I think ShahZam's on a team right now where it's his last. I think it's his last bridge that he has in the North American scene. I think if this team doesn't work out for ShahZam, I think he's in trouble finding another squad moving forward.
Moses, I understand what you're saying there. In a logical sense, you're right. And if it was 6 months ago, you'd be absolutely right. But I just want to remind you that TSM and Energy exist. So let's not get silly and pretend like this is his last possible chance. There's many more levels that he could drop to still and be fully salaried. So, okay, what do you actually think of Moses' point in general, though, ShahZam? Come on, I want your take on this.
Well, I can say for a fact, personal differences have like prevented me from getting on teams a couple years ago, where I can't say I can think of like an existing situation where there are players on a team that are just playing together because they're good together, like that they can't stand each other. That's what I mean, like currently existing. I'm not aware of any like personal problems amongst players in that sense, but yeah, like it's 100% right there.
What do you think, Hayes? This doesn't have to be about ShahZam. I just picked him as an example because I thought since he's in the chat, he to me he's someone who I would pick as an example of that. There must be other players like that. I mean, for example, okay, you think of some of the people who've been signed as like the up-and-coming talents over the last 6 months. These people weren't even an option 8 months ago. Like some of them would have been like, oh, I'll never get this guy. He talks shit online, or he's just an up-and-comer, whatever. People on your team used to be like in that situation, right? Where until you became CLG, no one gave you any respect.
Yeah, you know, while y'all were talking, I was thinking about it. It does happen. More than I didn't give it enough thought. It definitely does happen. I'm obviously I'm going to give examples, but it's a problem. But I think when it comes to like picking up the new talent and whatnot, I think it's probably I think it's a good thing. I mean, they just really, all these new players just need experience. So, I mean, I don't see the big deal. Why not?
So, okay, when I was talking to Moses a while ago about this issue, which is an obvious problem, like the idea that because of the contracts, even if tomorrow, let's say Cloud9 wanted a CLG player, I mean, just imagine that, right? And let's say they went to the CLG player and said, listen, you lovable bald bastard, join our team. I mean, wait, no, you're not available. Okay, the guy with the eyebrows, you want in, like, and let's say all of them, Hotshot's like, listen, I will sell him to you for $1 million. And they said, oh, fuck, that's too much. So anyway, for whatever reason in this hypothetical, I made it silly there, right? Let's say in this hypothetical world, they couldn't get that player. Then obviously they could just say, right, well, like ShahZam said, we tried to get a lot of people and they weren't available and we literally couldn't sign them, so we had to sign this person. I can definitely see how that's a problem. And I can acknowledge for most teams right now, from knowing a lot of the contract situations, there is very little talent available unless you're willing to spend like $60,000 or something like that, So in that world, it's actually a valid excuse to say I can't get a better player. But I said to Moses, if you actually think it through and you just adapt to the new paradigm that exists, contracts, then I actually made a video on this topic. It essentially becomes its own solution, suggests itself, which is that just like in all real sports, everyone finds out when someone's contract ends, and then, for example, I mean, an obvious example is Skadoodle, right? If Cloud9's playing bad in 3 months and Skadoodle's contract ends, then that's obviously like a fake number is when it ends. Let's say in 3 months Skadoodle's contract ends, then the idea is CLG comes to him, Team Liquid comes to him, OpTic comes to him, they all present their offer, like, hey, if you join us, we'd give you this, and at that point in time, the excuse doesn't exist anymore, right? At that point in time, you can't say it's because of the contract, because you had the chance to sign him now. Will that actually happen, do you think? Because at the moment, I get the sense the reason it didn't happen is because teams still think as a unit and they all just signed together. Like they didn't think individually, if you know what I mean.
Yes, that was definitely the biggest problem with every team, because we all signed as teams and we were like, hold on, you're going to pay us to play? Holy shit. Okay, let's do this. We didn't really think about it, honestly. It never crossed our mind like, oh my God, I'm going to be like, I literally have no options for the next year or 2 years, depending on how long you signed for. And there are teams who signed for 2 years. So it's like, they're locked for 2 years until they just aren't wanted anymore, basically. So it's definitely bad for the scene that this happened. Like, it's very bad. We don't get to change our rosters at all as we see fit. Like, even if an opportunity comes, like a player is unhappy, and we want that player, we cannot get him. It just can't happen. So it's really bad for the NA scene that it happened this way. But you can't blame anyone but the players. We were just stupid. I mean, honestly, what do you expect when you offer young people like money to play a video game?
Yeah.
We were just dumb.
Maybe this is an unrelated question, but is that also the reason why the average salary in NA is lower? Do you think too many teams are locked in from before, or they signed up too long? And because one of the reasons why it's higher in Europe now is purely because every X months teams either re-signed for more with the same org, or they could be bid on, and that's why people like Astralis and FaZe obviously have got crazy amounts, because they were the hottest property. They were the best team you could buy at the time.
Yeah, that is definitely part of it. I can say from at least CLG standpoint, they're very cooperative when it comes to like salary and like restructuring contracts and stuff like that. They're not like sticklers on it. They're not going to hold us to it until the end of the contract. They're pretty willing to negotiate on a lot of stuff, but I can't say the same for a lot of orgs. So,
ShahZam, if this exists, this scenario I suggested, that you just wait until the contract runs out, and then like free agency, you can just offer the person a contract. In 6 months from now, a bunch of these contracts must have ended. Some good players must have had their contract end in 6 months, because the odds that everyone signed over that amount of time ago is not that reasonable. Let's say in 6 months from now, does that mean that all these teams that now can say, well, I can't get anyone, they'll be able to get good players? Like C9 could upgrade a player, or Team Liquid could get a different player, or CLG could get a different player. You think it'll happen?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if they're great, good, well-rounded players that are free from their contract, you can 100% expect teams to look at those players and take the opportunity. Like, I think, like, Hayes is really right there, is that a year ago, or over a year ago, nobody was getting salaries, and then it got introduced to the scene, and everyone's just signing 2-year contracts with insane buyouts, not really understanding like growth of esports and like what their future lies as like a player on that team. So,
what is your thoughts on this, Moses? Because I never actually got your take on it. I just told you basically the answer, and then I tuned out, mate. So
yeah, you really did. I remember that conversation.
Okay. So what were your thoughts, though?
I thought you were right. Okay, that's it. Let's move on. No, I mean, you that was a good point that you made. But I just think now that this year, because I think right around like that January of last year, like I know you guys saw CLG, what was it, January or December or something, right before MLG. I think that's when most of the North American teams started getting this offer. I think it just needs to be a situation where you guys are smarter about it. And I think now that you guys have gone through this first round, I think moving forward, most players and teams are going to be much more intelligent about the contracts they sign, much more intelligent about how they form and draft these contracts. And yeah, I mean, the contract thing could be a big block to preventing North American teams from growing and developing. You guys should start trying to like trade contracts instead of buyouts. Like, have you guys thought about like salary caps and shit?
Mm-mm.
I can say we've ever considered.
How cool would that be, Duncan, if we start getting like contract trades in this bitch?
The problem with that, though, is that unfortunately, like, it would be very hard to fit. Like, obviously, the idea in real sports is sometimes you do a trade that, like, actually the players aren't as good, but they just are on equal salaries, so the trade can work in, like, salary cap sports. The problem I see in NA is, okay, I'll give you the example of the one I was on before, this hypothetical world in which C9 was trying to get a CLG player. Well, who the fuck is CLG going to take from them that's going to be the equal trade, you know? Like, the odds are they're taking one of CLG's best players, and then they're going to offer one of their less good players as the trade offer, right? So I don't think the team would. I can't think of many scenarios in which the team would accept it. I mean, the only ones I can think of actually is like what CLG got, which is they got a player which for them was actually a solid player, but the Team Liquid didn't want anymore, Fugly. Let's say there was a world in which they could have traded a player they'd wanted over to Team Liquid that Team Liquid wanted for the same reasons. It didn't work as well on Team Liquid, and Team Liquid wanted CLG and worked on Team Liquid. So maybe in that scenario it could happen. The biggest problem I see is that most times in NA, at least I feel like, when people want to get rid of someone, it's because like actually most people don't think that player is very good. That's the only problem
that's
I can
probably
see
fair.
with that.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ko? Okay, let's ask some specific stuff. So first and foremost, since there's no Cloud9 member in this chat, I mean, there used to be a Cloud9 member. None of you will ever be on Cloud9 from now. Don't worry about that. Like that's you're not going to jeopardize anything. It'll never happen for you. So just give up that dream. But obviously, we can analyze Cloud9 without people having to be like, well, he's my teammate, you know, I think he's a good guy, and he is learning about the game and when to be a bit eager to score, whichever team that might be I'm talking about. So if we talk about Cloud9, why do you think, Hayes, that Cloud9's a bit underwhelming now? What's the reason?
Well, I think Sean departing was a huge part of it. I mean, you lose like the one unbanned great tactical mind in... well, I mean, there's other great tactical minds. Don't get me wrong, but like Sean, he studied teams on a level that no other strat caller does. He truly studied teams and he got everyone on his team prepared, and because they didn't do it on their own. And a lot of North American players are like that. But so Sean took all the burden and just put it on himself, and really, man, he went to work. And when they lost that, I mean, you're losing a good part of your team and like your tactical advantage that you had. So I think, I mean, people always like to give Stewie shit, but like, I don't think Stewie's that bad. I think Stewie's pretty good. Individual talent wise, he's super, like he's a great aimer, awesome spray control. He makes questionable decisions, but you can teach that. It's fine. He can change over time. So I don't think people need to be so hung up on that. I think losing Sean was really the big problem of that team.
And
It's not that.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Moses. Keep going.
It's not that people don't think Stewie can improve. It's that looking at that team, who's going to be the one to teach him? Because Nothing still has those same issues. Nothing is one of those players that has great spray control, great aim, but makes questionable decisions. I mean, who on that team is going to take him under their wing? It's not going to be. I mean, is it going to be Shroud or Skadoodle?
Yeah, that's why I was saying losing Sean was such a big deal.
Yeah,
that's definitely
I mean,
the problem.
and that just circles back to that leadership issue where it's not even necessarily tactically, although they do have an issue tactically, obviously, but there's no actual like leadership presence on that team, or like very many teams in North America, to tell someone like this is a bad play and enforce good behaviors in their play moving forward.
What do you think the issues holding C9 back, ShahZam?
Hayes covered it. Like the biggest thing is losing Sean. Like as someone that was on that team, Sean literally did all the work. He was the one that watched the demos. He was the one that created the strats, that prepped the team, that told everyone exactly what to do, that painted out the picture for everyone. Like he was just the one that did everything, and they lost that. And C9's never going to be as good as they were with Sean Gares. Like that's unless they get like a coach, IGL leadership figure that can like hold people accountable for what they do all this. I don't think they're going to find anyone like that. And like he was the last like good. He was a good leader in a sense that he did tell people when they did things wrong how they should have done it. He should have been maybe like a bit more aggressive about it in a sense, but that's the biggest thing. Is Jordan's trying. I know, speaking to him, like he's trying his best to be an IGL, but it's a lot more than just pulling strats at the start of the round.
Do you think that in like 6 months from now, what do you think the odds are that Cloud9's the best team? Everyone. What are the odds that they are the number one NA team?
I'll let you lead, Moses.
Oh man, I have a rule against saying 0%, so I'll give them 10%.
Okay.
Leading NA team, is that the question?
Yeah, number one NA team 6 months from now. So a bunch of tournaments will have gone. People will all have bedded in all the rosters.
Oh man, 20%, 25%, something like that.
Okay. What do you think, ShahZam?
First number that came to mind is 20%.
Okay. So everyone's saying not a very high percent, and yet in theory they are a team that they still have. Listen, Shroud and Skadoodle are still some of the best NA players. They obviously have a great structure around them in terms of the organisation. They're obviously very popular. They'll probably even get invites to tournaments. So aside from like not having Sean Gares, etc., what is it about this lineup that you think would hold them back from being the best NA team? Like what disadvantage do they have compared to other teams, or what do they lack? What do you think, hazed?
I think they're going to fall behind tactically, and I think they're not going to have anyone unless they pick up some analysts, which I don't know that I'll ever know that unless they tell me personally, because I don't think they'll announce if they get analysts. Like most teams don't do that anyway. So if they get some analysts, maybe they can do it, but without analysts, and I think they're just going to fall behind tactically. They're going to be unprepared for a lot of matches. And specifically against European teams, where they're gonna need someone really studying these teams to know where to take advantage of them. So I think tactically they'll fall behind.
So ShahZam, if a team doesn't have great tactics or a great in-game leader who can like bridge that gap, and like come up with something cool or read the game very well, if you don't have that, obviously another way you can go is you can just have super sick players, or you can have, if not super sick players, you can have a really good distribution of roles. Like you have the right player in this role and this one and this one. They all complement each other. How will C9 do in this respect? Like skill, roles? Do they have is the bunch good enough? It sounds like it isn't. That must be a reason, right?
I mean, all the players on the team are like extremely high skilled. Like honestly, Shroud individually, I think he could be the best American player, like a top international star, if he really wanted to. Like as someone that played with those guys, like
what does that mean? Wanted to though?
It seems like Shroud will have like great performances here, a bad performance here. He doesn't really care. Like he never really cared. He's just like okay with it.
Okay.
There's not going to be a whole lot of individual effort on that team. Like Jordan could like try to help them tactically, but if those players weren't even able to respect Sean doing that, do you think they're going to respect Jordan doing it? Like those, and then outside of that, like Scott doesn't play CS outside of practice. I know that. We played a match against them recently. It was on Inferno. They don't play Inferno. The thing is that I went back and watched the demo just to see who did this. And it was Ska that threw an Arch Inferno smoke, which is like one of the easiest smokes in the game. He absolutely misses it. Then 2 seconds later, Jordan throws one, misses it as well. Like if he played, like let's just say he played an FPL and he threw that smoke, it was wrong. He'd be like, wow, I should know that. Let me go in a server right after this and figure that out. They're not going to do any of that. I don't see that happening, honestly.
Okay, is this not an NA problem though? Let me give you an example. Okay, so I've seen a lot of North American teams who did like decently at a tournament. Okay, so let's give an example of what CLG just did. We finished 4th at Game Show. You finished, now that's not like an amazing result, like you didn't win the tournament or whatever, but you finished ahead of G2 and some of these teams. So you finished like a pretty decent result. Like it's a solid result overall with some good maps along the way, some decent series performances. And so in the end, it's an okay performance when you consider all the teams there. But I've seen a lot of big international tournaments where if an NA team had like a series that was good or a map that was good, it's almost like if they then lost the tournament, they were sort of like, we could have got them, or it was good. It's like it feels like they're almost like not contented with it, but like a little bit complacent. Like it's not that big a deal. Whereas, for example, I remember when Fnatic lost to TSM in the Fragmite Masters Season 4 final, which was the one right in the middle of the year when TSM was like beating them every time, And in this final, Fnatic still finished second, Olafmeister punched the table to the extent that the table was like had like a dent in it of his fist. And I'm not saying like we want people to get like raged like that, but the point is, even coming second in that tournament was like fucking tilting Olafmeister super hard. Whereas I've seen NA players and teams, yeah, they weren't happy that they lost, but it wasn't like the end of the world, you know.
Yeah, it's all relative. Like, people get like a little bit of success, or based off of expectations, like they do a little better than they expected, and some people will just be like, not bad. And then you've got a team like Fnatic, like they're supposed to win the tournament, expected to win it, and then they're like, then they take it more.
Hazed.
You're talking to the tilt master, dude. I get when I lose, it is it's just the worst day for me. Like I can't. Like, losing is the worst thing in the world for me. I can't even speak for people who are just like okay with losing. I don't know what that's like. I despise it more than anything.
And how does that express itself? Like, do you get like if okay, let's say a teammate plays like shit in a big crucial game, it's not a problem for you. There's never any issues.
Okay, I will never go at my teammate for playing like shit in a match. Okay. I will not do that. But if I played like shit, that's a different story. Like, they're going to know, because I'm going to apologize to him, first of all, but I'm going to be raging. Like, I'm not happy. I'll give a really good example at Cluj-Napoca against our last
Navi,
match
maybe?
was on Navi on Kabul, I think. I'm pretty sure I had like maybe 7 frags in like almost 30 rounds. Or sorry, it wasn't Cluj, it was Cologne. It was Cologne against Navi. It was 16-14 that we lost to make it out of groups. I think I had like 7 kills that whole match out of 30 rounds. And JDM and Tarek both had like 30.
Yeah.
They both had almost, I think JDM had over 30. Tarek almost had 30. They were carrying the fuck out of me. I've never been like more mad in my life. Like, and they knew, because like I've broken like keyboards, mice, dude. I've broken shit. I don't take losses well. I just don't understand people who can be okay with it. That doesn't make sense to me.
So okay, you've just mentioned the 2 star players of your team, Tarek, JDM. How do they take losses?
JDM takes them about as bad as me. Tarek, he tends to try to be like the good spirit of the team whenever we take losses. He's definitely not happy, but he tries to take it upon himself to like cheer everyone up. Like, it's not a good environment to be around, obviously, when everyone's like raging or like sad. So he tries to like be the good guy of the bunch, but you can tell he doesn't take it well.
So Moses, you've been around a lot of NA teams at tournaments. What do you think on this topic?
I think, well, this is how there was that question a while ago where I think, was it like JW tweeted out that the luminosity and the Brazilian players just always seem to want it more. I mean, I watched North American teams get just wrecked, and they're all crushed. I know they want it. It's not a matter of desire, obviously. That's never been the issue in my mind. It's been about getting there. And like at a certain point, and it's not even just losing matches, but it's being at the level that North America Counter-Strike is at, where it's like a fucking meme through the community for anything that fucks up or anything that's like bad. Immediately, like the meme is just put NA in front of it. Like, does that not, like, if you're going to get pissed, great. If you're going to be really upset that you lose, great. But like, where does the transition into turning that into some like kind of fuel to improve? Like, is that occurring? Like, I've seen Fallen lose matches, get knocked out of tournaments, and then he's tweeting out 5 hours later, I just finished watching all the VODs of our matches. Like, is there anyone who takes that negative energy and tries to use it in a positive way, where he's like, yeah, I'm fucking pissed we lost. Why did we lose? Let's go look at it right now while it's fresh in our heads. Before you go drink your sorrows away, we're going to sit down and we're going to watch these VODs.
Well, that honestly depends, like, if we have a laptop or not. I mean, we can't always watch it at the event, obviously. We have to wait till we get back sometimes. Sure. So, like, that's pretty situational.
Okay.
But I don't know. Go ahead.
So, okay, Moses made the point there. So I'll actually do the same thing, but not as like a joke, okay? So here's the thing. If I'm talking about star players in NA, it's actually quite natural that I would say he's an NA star. I won't just say he's a star player because I don't want them to confuse, let's say, Shroud with Olafmeister, because there's a difference between those two players and what they can do in the game. So here's the thing. I've actually never believed as like a general principle that like somehow Guardian and Kenny S and Olafmeister are like genetically more skilled than Shroud, Skadoodle, JDM, Tarek, whoever these people might be, Nitro, whoever the most skilled players in NA. I don't think that they are genetically, magically more skilled. I think actually if there was some sort of way to check the metrics on everyone, like what the reaction time is, the Raymark and all, in some pure way that didn't interact with like game sense and all this sort of stuff, I think actually you'd probably be surprised that some of the NA players might be better than some of these guys I'm talking about, or some of them might be like equal, where in the game they're not. Like the other guy does outperform them. But you have to say, if all of us in this chat now made our top 10 NA players in terms of like stars, I think they wouldn't match up very well at the moment with the top 10 European stars. Is that unreasonable, Hazed?
That's not really unreasonable. I think you're right.
Do you have a theory as to why that is then?
Man, I'd have to think about that quite a bit, honestly. I don't know. I think maybe because like the EU stars are born through like team play and like scrimming, for example, and like they build up through team play, whereas in North America you build up as an individual by pugging. Like that's the only way I could think of it. I don't even think that's a good answer, honestly, but that's the only thing I can think of on the spot.
Can anyone else come up with anything? Anything spring to mind as a reason as to why? What could be changed?
I think it does come down to.
Go ahead.
I think it does come down to team play. I mean, I reject the idea that even coming up pugging, you can't change habits. Or I mean, everyone in North America knows this. I mean, it's in their minds. So you got to think that at some point someone's going to break out of that habit, no matter what they come from. But I think we talk a lot about Olaf as the best player in the world, and I think I talked to him in Cologne last year. I think there's a lot of truth in the fact that he's a player who improved massively from his individual level that he was at once he was in Fnatic. I think they learned, and you look at JW as well. When he joins that team, he gets elevated, and I think they've found a way through the way that they like to play and through the system that they like to run that they've all gotten better individually for being in that team with other 4 people.
Do you have a reason, ShahZam?
I'd have to look into it more, to be honest. It's pretty obvious that our stars really don't match up against the European stars, but it probably is that these players they grow and become known because of their performances within a team and as a player in a team. A lot of NA stars came to be known because of how well they did as an individual, pugs or whatever, and I'm sure that has something to do with it. But
okay, I've got a reason, or a theory or a hypothesis I'll come up with, okay? So first of all, I will say as a caveat, it's not all on the star player. For example, I don't think it's a coincidence that the period when Shroud was his absolute best, when he wrecked that final against Fnatic in the Pro League, was when Freakazoid joined the team and he was entering all the time, and then Shroud had the perfect trade scenario every time. Likewise, Nitro hit his peak when Elige got really good at entering, and then suddenly his life was easy. So it is true, having role players around you will elevate the stars play, facilitates him being better. You do have to say that in general. So it's maybe unfair to some degree to compare the star, because if the team itself isn't as good at the roles, they're not going to have the structure they obviously have in Fnatic to set up Olafmeister and Guardian to do the things they want to do in their teams. But with that said, one difference I do notice with the NA stars and the European stars is if I take say I did my top 10 European stars and I had Olafmeister, Device, Guardian, Snacks, all the people we think of over the last year who were beastly players, it's very rare that they have a fatal flaw. Actually, of those names I just listed there, one of the only ones who has a fatal flaw is Device, actually, because he's a choker, but that's it. Aside from that, in the games he doesn't choke, he's fantastic, he's very well rounded. So even if, for example, let's look at those stars, the ones that I pick out who are AWPers, for example. So I pick out Guardian, Kenny S. One of the things those two guys are famous for, fantastic rifles for an AWPer. In the case of Guardian, amazing deagle for an AWPer. He's got other aspects. He's very well rounded. I think in general, most of the European stars are pretty well rounded for what they do. Whereas actually, if I go through all the NA stars, you could think I'm being very critical, but I bet you for every NA star, I could give you one fatal flaw. So I'll give you a couple, okay, off the top of my head. So for Shroud, it's not just the idea of he doesn't want it that much. I get what you mean by that. For me, what it is that he's someone where it feels like he's too conservative in the game. Like when I've watched him play on his stream, right? And then when I watch him on his stream, I'm like, where's this guy in the fucking games? Like, this guy can tear up the whole server anytime he wants to. But I watch him in the actual pro matches, and it's like he's the limiting factor to his own level. Like it's very rare he will have a game where he plays like super bold and really decisive. It almost feels like he just takes like the easy shots and he tries to let the game come to him. And whereas if you watch Olafmeister, like a comparable player, Olafmeister like forces the game to be the way he wants it to be, and he just like runs over someone in a half, and if he gets going, he just wrecks. It's like he forces the game to be the way he wants to be. I'll give you another name. So let's go with Skadoodle. Skadoodle had a period where maybe as a player he was really well rounded, like he had pretty decent rifles for an AWPer, but then he's the player where famously everyone says he doesn't practice that much outside of the games, and if you watch him in the game, he just holds a spot and doesn't necessarily call his own plays. For example, he doesn't say I'm going to switch it up and go to this site now. Go down every name. I could go for the CLG people and give you reasons. Like, what does anyone think of any of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even necessarily fatal flaws. I think it's kind of the same vein. I think it's also just a lot of the stars are just one-dimensional. And I think even going back towards C9, I think that's a huge issue with Cloud9, is that their role players are so one-dimensional that if they're not doing that role, they're highly ineffective at times. And I think that's a big thing that needs to get worked on. I mean, the best example of that, and Hayes, you know it, is JDM. And I mean, Duncan, you just did a video on it. Just so incredibly one-dimensional in terms of the fact that he has to have an op in his hands. And I think that's true in a lot of cases of the North American stars.
Hayes, do you actually agree with that? Like maybe you don't. Maybe you think there's a reason as to why he had like almost no M4 kills or whatever. Do you have a counterpoint to that, or do you agree with it, or what?
Not really. I'd say you're pretty much on point. Like we all have like some pretty big flaws, and it's not like it's a secret. So yeah, I mean in the case of JDM, he really wants an op, and we'll do anything to get an op in his hands. And we've always told him, we're like, you don't always need an op. His rifles at times we think aren't even that bad, because he does put a lot of work into his rifles. He DMs. I'd say his work ethic in terms of of all the NA players might be the best. Honestly, that might be biased, but he works he plays and watches more demos than anyone. So
is it true? NBK tweeted out that he has like a stat track op with like 60,000 kills on it.
Probably. I don't know, but I guess the amount this guy DMs is actually absurd, and he practiced rifles a lot. So you don't get to see his rifle very often. So obviously there's like, people are just going to assume it's quite bad. I'm not going to say it's a great rifle, but I don't think it's as bad as people think. It's mainly because he just never buys one. Like he just never has it ever. But outside of JDM, well, I mean, in general, you're right. Like, I have major flaws. Tarek has major flaws. JDM has major flaws. So it exists within every player in NA. It's not even just the stars. So,
Moses, are you buying this? Because here's the problem with that scenario. Okay, is that
not really?
The problem with the JDM one is that that's what people will say. They'll go, well, the whole thing is, because here's the thing, he's a very good AWPer. So they'll go, well, since he's so good as an AWPer and he's the star player of CLG, they always give him an AWP, and they always tell him to save for an AWP, and they always let him get an AWP. The problem with that is, there used to be this guy called Kenny S, right? And he was like the only legit like superstar player on his team. And basically, you wanted an AWP in his hand every round you could get. And so every time someone had like 4750 on Titan, it felt like they dropped him an AWP, they saved him an AWP, they got an AWP from a dead body, he bought an AWP every time he could. Yeah, this guy has shed loads of rifle kills. He has tons of rifle kills, and his actual ratio of rifle kills to AWP still pretty good, actually. So I can see vaguely how that would work, but I don't think it works in terms of if you want to be one of the best players in the world. I don't see how you can have rifles at the level of JDM put that way.
I don't think you guys have nearly as much confidence as you seem to think you do in his rifles, or else we would see more tactics of you guys getting a rifle in his hands and executing something when he has a rifle. We would more often see you say pick up an M4 in light armor and get a smoke and some flashes instead of getting that glass cannon op. We don't ever see that out of you guys. So I mean, there's some disconnect there. It's hard for me to imagine PETA being a Swede being okay with just sacrificing everything to get him an op.
Well, it's not that like. I see where you're coming from. It sounds like we don't have a lot of confidence in his rifles. I'm I'm pretty
No,
sure.
it sounds like you do have confidence in his rifles because of what you just said, but we don't ever see that translate to the game.
Well, it's because he doesn't want a rifle. He doesn't have confidence in his rifles.
Okay.
That's the thing. It's not like we're totally okay with him. We want him to rifle at times, but he doesn't want a rifle. He'd rather op because he has so much confidence in his op that he's like in his mind. If he has an op, we're winning that round. That is what he truly believes. So when we ask him to use a rifle, he's like, well, why don't I just buy an op and I'll win the round? That's honestly how he thinks. And so, and I don't know what PETA's thoughts are on this. Obviously, like, I mean,
do you see the inherently individual play that's being made with that logic?
I'm not going to deny that. Like I said, individual play is what NA is based on. Okay.
ShahZam, you are not on CLG, and I also think you probably never will be. So, again, feel free to speak entirely at your own leisure. You're an AWPer. You're someone who has to use the rifle sometimes. In fact, most people would say you're better with an AWP than a rifle. What do you think on this topic? Will you weigh in on this topic of JDM? Because the thing is, when I watch his AWP, it's like if his AWP was the only issue, there'd be no problem here. He seems very, very good for a North American. Very stable, particularly, which is awesome quality to have in a great AWPer, obviously. But what do you think on this issue of, like, his rifles seem non-existent, basically?
Well, I like from my own observations, like just scrimming them and like watching CLG's games, is that I notice sometimes like the economical decision CLG will make is like sometimes they'll double save when I think they should force buy just to get JDM the op. I think there are a lot of instances like T-Side Inferno where you could be like a lot of maps where they could be running something a lot faster and just take advantage of how a team's playing, but instead they like give him an op and just get him a rifle and just throw him in there. I think he's probably got like a pretty good rifle. We just don't see any of it, and that's probably because of the mentality. Like, you know, he just wants an op. And he thinks he can win the round with it, and that could very well be true. But maybe in some situations, it might be better for you to have a rifle, and so your team can win the round.
Okay. Okay, let's do a few of the NA stars then. Let's see what people's thoughts are on these issues. So I gave before the example of Shroud, and ShahZam said he could be like the best. It was hazed said he could be the best NA player, right? I forget which one of you was. He could be like the best.
It was ShahZam.
Shahzam.
So Hayes, what do you think on this topic? Could Shroud be like an Olofmeister type player?
Yeah, when I look at Shroud when he's streaming, this is before he was even on Cloud9. I was like, this dude he might have the best aim I have ever seen. Like his aim is so superb, it's unreal, and I don't know why it doesn't translate. Like no one knows why it doesn't. I don't think anyone knows why it doesn't translate.
I mean, put it this way: when you're playing okay, one sec, I'll get to you. When you're playing a game against him, hazed, I mean, you must know that if you're in a match against a real like LAN match, that Shroud from the stream doesn't turn up, right? He's not just doing that to you all the time. It's not as dangerous as that, right?
I'm completely honest that it is not, in my opinion, the same Shroud. Like, it's just not. So I don't know where the disconnect's happening because I don't know him personally. I mean, I've talked to him, but like, I haven't been on a team with him. I don't deal with him every day, so I don't know what he's like or where the disconnect's happening. But it's definitely not the same Shroud, in my opinion.
Okay, what's the theory, ShahZam? What do you have?
Well, I played on C9 with Shroud, and I noticed that, like, let me give you an example. Like, on quad at A, on cash, Shroud will sit there at quad and just, as a CT, and just take aim battles. He'll play an enemy, you know, he'll win the aim battles, then he plays a Fnatic, he kills an Olaf, but then he gets traded. You know, like, then you lose the site. That's just what he does, is all he did was just take aim battles at quad. Imagine if Shroud was vocal and was like, all right, Jordan, you're going to flash me and Ryan into A main at 132, and then like he plays with the confidence and makes the plays he kind of does on stream. And like you see it, like when Shroud has a streak where he does really well, it's when he's making plays, when he's moving around, not just sitting there like a turret.
Okay. Obviously, you don't want to throw someone under the bus, but is there any truth to the perception that Reddit has and people who aren't in the teams have, that the problem with Skadoodle is that he just likes having a really nice salary and being a really good team, and when the game's live, like for an official match, yeah, he's totally there playing, but maybe he's not like the guy, like he's not like JDM, for example, where he's killing himself in DMing and all this stuff. Is there any truth to that? Does anyone think?
Personally, I have no idea. Like, no. I've never played on a team with Ska, but
No, I definitely think he cares. I think he's just a very quiet individual. I think he just has that calm confidence, and yeah, I don't think he's like content, but I just don't. At the same time, and I guess it kind of amounts to the same thing. I don't think he's one of those guys who's going to put in the extra outside work.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
like I
By
don't
the way,
think it's not because
just
he
to-
cares.
just to-
He's just not going to.
Just as a side point, this is one of the problems with having that discussion. Don't make the options cares 100% or doesn't care at all, cares 0%. Those never should be the options. Because I always say to people, one of the reasons why this sort of conversation tilts me is because they always do that. Like if they hear a player doesn't practice the maximum amount, they go, oh, he doesn't even care. No, most professional sportsmen do not practice all hours of the day. What happens is they practice as much as you're supposed to, and then the guy who's like the maniacal, like Kobe Bryant, Derek Jeter type guy, he's the guy who stays behind for the 3 hours extra, but he does that because he's like obsessed with winning and maybe he doesn't even have a life outside the game, you know? Like those guys are above and beyond. You can't expect that of normal people. Even people who are pro players, they're just normal people as well. So don't make it like he doesn't care, but does he go above and beyond? What do you think, Hazed?
Yeah, I don't really know Ska. I don't know how much he practices, so I just think he's quiet. That's the only thing I truly know about Ska. Honestly, that's all I know. Is he's a quiet guy and he's got an amazing op. That's all I know.
Because, I mean, here's the thing. If we're talking about someone in your team, Hazed, you're going to give us all the reasons from within the team as to why the guy has an issue here or why you haven't been able to get him to do this. But here's the thing. Since none of us are on Cloud9, I mean, I'm sure if you look at Cloud9 now, Hazed, and you see Shroud and you see Skadoodle, there's no way their team should be as bad as it is. These guys should be more effective than they are, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. They should be way better. It's just so hard to say why they're not performing like the way they should, and it's hard for me to say that because they just like totally scraped us in 2 maps. But I think, I mean, if statistically, if you look at it, Scott's been playing really well the last few months, or maybe the last month. I'm not sure, but he's been playing pretty well. So it's it's so hard to say, honestly. I'd have to think about it.
Moses, you remember during that run in the summer when Cloud9 had all those second places, and then even in CVL they were top 4, so they had this nice little run of tournaments. Why don't we see that Skadoodle as much now, or didn't in the last 6 months?
I think most of it's because he had a lot of help. I think the big key to that, the success in that run, and this is, I think, it comes down to that conversation about roles, which is so tricky these days. But I think their roles are so well defined that when one of the roles was not performing up to par at that level, I think a lot of it collapsed around them. Like that was probably the best Counter-Strike Global Offensive we've seen nothing play. I think Freakazoid hit a peak there where we haven't seen him get back to that level. Shroud as well. And Sean's calling was so, I mean, we saw from the VODs how accurate it was and how good it was. And none of those people were going to be able to keep up that pace because we know nothing is just inherently inconsistent, that he wasn't going to be able to keep going with that. We knew that Sean, with all the prep that we heard that he put in through the comms, that he was going to get burnt out because he's the only one working on it. And I think too much stuff just kind of collapsed. And I think it's hard. I think it's just too hard for Ska. I mean, you brought it up. This is very true about Ska. He doesn't like being a mobile opper. He doesn't go around the map and exert complete map dominance with the op when he has it rolling. He stays in his spot and he shuts down his one spot. So all teams have to do is go away from him. So it's hard for him to be that dominant when the other side of the map isn't performing as well.
Okay, I've got a question for you. Here's an interesting way to ask this question because it's a way where I think you might be able to answer it without being like super insulting or anything. So, okay, Hazed, if during the last NA shuffle, one of the moves that had happened is Cloud9 had decided to cut nothing, and they'd removed him from the team. Do you think that any of the other top NA teams would have picked him up? Like, would Team Liquid have made space and got nothing in? Would CLG have made space and got nothing in? Do you think that he would have been someone that everyone wanted?
The same NA shuffle that we got Fugly? Is that the one you're talking about?
The last few months, yeah.
Okay. That's tough. He would have been in the talks, like he'd have been one of our candidates. So it's not like we don't ever like just be like, that's the guy we want. No matter what, that's him. We try to like talk to everyone and get opinions and get like not just our opinions but like outside opinions. So we'll talk to like his ex teammates, etc., and see who we want. It's never like yeah, we're just gonna get Jordan.
Okay.
So he'd definitely been one of our candidates if that was the case. Yeah.
ShahZam, do you think Team Liquid or CLG would have recruited Nothing if he'd been cut from Cloud9?
I think both teams would have definitely considered him. It's not like Jordan doesn't have an insanely high skill ceiling. He does. And I do think that sometimes a change of environment, you're just playing with different people, definitely change how a player plays as well. Who knows, like, if Jordan joined a Team Liquid and they had him in a really specific role as like a lurker, this is it, this is what you do, and Jordan could succeed on that team playing that.
Okay, what do you think, Moses?
I don't think Liquid would have, just because I think Hiko's there, and it's not that I think Hiko dislikes Nothing, but I think that Hiko wants. I mean, he was on a team with Nothing, and he's talked openly about the fact that not enough work was put in his opinion. And that's not just Nothing. That was a couple other players on the team as well. CLG might have. I think Nothing can be a really good player if he gets into a team and he finds some way to take up a more supportive role instead of trying to be like the one who's the playmaker.
Okay. Is he trying to be the playmaker on C9?
No, but he's also trying to in-game lead in the interim. I think at times, when Sean was there, at times, no matter what position he's on his map, you always got that sense that Nothing was still looking for that one play that was going to like kick him off, kick him into snowball mode,
So, okay, ShahZam, when I talk about Tariq, okay, people might think, if they've heard a lot of my videos, they probably think I hate Tariq or I think he's dog shit or something. That's not the case at all, right? The problem I've seen with Tariq is he's one of the NA stars that I think that has the biggest problem with when he's playing an NA team and when he's playing like a European team. Like when he's playing the NA team, he might just go crazy, he might take over the whole game, he might be the biggest impact player. But then you put him against the European teams, at least, in the games I've seen him play, I've very rarely seen him be like the star player in the server. What do you think on this? Do you disagree?
Honestly, I can't really say I've noticed that as like a big factor in CLG or Tariq itself. Like, I'll be honest, I've never really looked out to see how Tariq played individually against European compared to American teams. I think it's a lot more than just him playing differently versus European teams compared to NA teams. So I can't agree or disagree. Like, I haven't seen it.
Okay. Moses, what do you think? By the way, everyone's obviously welcome to disagree. You don't have to agree with any opinion I have. It's just an opinion.
Yeah, I know. I actually don't have a lot of faith in Tariq as a top player. Even in North America, I think his time as someone who can get away with what he's put into the game, I think that's going to start fading away, and I think we've already started seeing it. I think North America is catching up to him a lot.
Why is that though? Because even to this day, one of the things about Tariq that's always been frustrating is he's like one of the players where I wish FPL didn't exist, because when I see the clips that come out of him in FPL, this is like the shit where if he did half of the stuff in an actual match, he'd be like a superstar player. People would be raving about this guy now, but the stuff he does in the FPL clips, you don't really see that often in like the major or European LAN.
I think it's because Tariq, when he gets into matches, especially against Europeans, he tries to like outthink people. It seems sometimes you can like almost like see his brain working when he's making plays in the game. And like in FPL, he's just streaming, he's having fun, and he's just playing like it's a pug. And I think that I just don't think he has like the game sense required to make some of the plays that he goes for. I've never understood why he's not just like the straight up entry fragger.
Hazed, here's the thing. What Moses just said there, like he thinks that Tariq tries to outthink people, and he, like for example, he doesn't do what you. If you were someone who accepted that you're not going to outthink someone, you'd try and just like force the action to be like an aim duel, or you'd start early in the round so you didn't have to make a lot of decisions. What is your thought on this topic?
Okay, so this actually just made me like think about the Shroud scenario as well, but.
Okay.
So like Shroud and Tariq are very similar in that respect. Like when they're on stream, they always have these crazy clips, and even in like FPL, which is other pros, I think what also allows them to have these crazy clips is the fact that in AFPL it's just uncoordinated. So like these clips are just naturally going to happen when who you're playing against is uncoordinated. They're not calming correctly. They're not on the same page, etc. There's more opportunity to take advantage of their mistakes. So I think that plays into it a little bit. I don't think the talent level changes. I think of the individual, it's more about who you're playing against changes, and they aren't making that many mistakes for them to take advantage of. So I think that's part of it. I mean, individually, like Tarek's, I don't know, he's insane, honestly. I think he's an amazing player. I think his problem is, like you said, sometimes he does try to outplay people. He's become almost too team oriented on some level. Like nowadays he won't go for the play because he'd rather stay back and play with us, and which is not a bad thing, but it's almost like it's not his style. So he's leaving his comfort zone, which is like, almost like a snacks type player. That's what I see him as individually. It's almost like a snacks. It's just he can't do it as well as snacks. That's the best way of putting it. But I don't know. I think lately he has not been on form. But when you compare it to EU teams versus NA teams, I don't think, at least from MLG Aspen till around the end of this year, end of last year, he performed about the same. He was always doing most of the work for the team. It's just like his supporting cast did not help him as much as they should have, including me. So I think that was the problem. But lately he has not been on form. So now it's up to his supporting cast to lift him up, and it just hasn't worked, honestly.
What's happened in your team where Tarek was considered, when you guys were in Mousepaz and they got picked up by CLG, Tarek was like the star name of that team. And still to this day, when people talk about CLG in like a pregame, it's always like Tarek's supposed to be the one that we're calling the star, but he's never come to fruition in that sense. And now even he's getting outshined by JDM. Like what's happening? How did that turn of events occur?
Well, like I say, he's become more of a team player now. He's more team oriented. Whereas in the past, when we first picked him up, we wanted him to be more team oriented, but more like just like good decision making, like, knowing when to trade, knowing when to peak, etc. And not always just relying on his own skill to win rounds. You can rely on your teammates at times. So back then it was more like when he first joined the team and I saw his skill level, I said, okay, I'm going to do everything for this guy. Like, I'm going to flash for him. If he needs me to use a smoke here, I'll use it. He basically is going to run the ship. As far as if he ever wanted to make a play, I was never going to tell him no. That's almost how it worked. I was playing for him. Now he kind of wants to play for us too. So I don't think that's a bad thing, but it clearly is going to affect his individual level because he's just not going to play as well because he's playing for other people, not just himself.
Admittedly, I have had very limited interactions with Tarek. He's not someone like I know on a personal level and I talk to a lot and I've gone deep into his mind or whatever. But in the very limited interactions I had with him, he literally basically told me a lot of the things that Hayes is suggesting here. Like, he thinks it's better if he plays like more of a passive role, and he's someone who makes a lot of decisions and he can outthink the opponent. A lot of these things, okay, he thought were his strengths. The problem I see with that is it's one of the only players I've ever met in Counter-Strike where they were essentially describing to me the opposite of their skill set, but then thinking that that's like the best approach for them. It's very rare. Like, usually, okay, I'll give you an example. So we used Apex before. Apex knows that he's not someone who's supposed to make a lot of decisions and supposed to be in like a late game 1v2 scenario and have to know how to outthink the opponent crim style. He knows his job is to run in first, sometimes without a flash, and just headshot the first two people. And so that's his job. He's accepted that. He finds teams that let him do that, and then he goes to work. He doesn't have any. There's no debate over what should he do and what role should he be in. Likewise with nothing. All these years, some of the C9 players wanted him to be more of an aggressive player, and he's like, no, I should be more of the lurker and do these. That's something else I see as the difference between NA and EU. It's very rare in EU that a player has in his own mind that his style and role is going to be almost the opposite to like his raw skill set, like what you would naturally assign him as his role. What does anyone think on this?
You mean like, well, I just reminded of Nitro not wanting to be an entry fragger. He wanted to be like a lurker. Didn't want to do like the entry role at all.
Here's a good one. So Nitro, to me, is someone who was actually in the same position as Tarek used to be, where I remember some of the crazy games Nitro had at the end of 2014, and I was like, oh, if he does any of this stuff, Team Liquid's going to be really good, blah, blah, blah. They weren't. He never did it, basically, for the first few months. And then what happened is, once he like just bought into this idea that no, I'm like actually in his team it's more of a split, but okay, in theory he's the second guy in, but sometimes he entries depending on which site it is and what map it is. So once he committed to the idea that okay, well obviously I can't be like the lurker and all the rest of it because those roles are taken. Hiko's got it, someone else has got it, Fugly. So once he decided like yeah, I'm one of the entry guys, I think he became way better. You saw his impact on games go like way through the roof, and now feels like he's at his peak at the moment. What does anyone think? I mean, you guys are players. You play the guy. You've played with him against him for over a year, both of you. What do you think of Nitro in this sense as a reference point?
Go ShahZam.
I think like sometimes it goes back to like having a leader. It's like a leader might be able to see better what the player's role should be, and they should take that role rather than what they think or what they prefer is good for them. Like, what's it called? Like we had a player on our team before, Rix, that was like a star fragger. He was just a great star player, but he would have been much better as an anchor player rather than playing like rotator spots, because I always thought of like an anchor player at a site to be like the player that, you know, the highest skilled player that could just get multi-frag, you know, that could lock a site down, being the only one there, and then like, you know, someone that kind of understands rotations better to be obviously the rotator. And it was something he kind of always refused to do, while the whole team understood that like this is something that needed to change. And so players need to like be willing to just try different roles and see if, why not give it a chance, see if it works.
What do you actually think of Nitro at the moment though? Like where does he fit up in this like mix of stars, and how good he is at his role, or how good he is in his team? Where do you see him at the moment?
I mean, honestly, I think he's one of the best NA riflers right now. And like, I always thought he should be an entry fragger as well. I don't understand why that wasn't something that he didn't want to do. It was obvious like he exceeded at that whenever he did it.
What do you think, Hazed?
Yeah, I've always thought Nitro is like probably ever since he got picked up by Liquid, or I guess it was Liquid that he got picked. Who did he get picked
It's
up?
technically Denial, but like
Denial,
yeah. Liquid, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So as soon as he got picked up, I started playing against him. Like I knew immediately this guy was going to be like at least a top 3 rifler in North America for like a few years. His rifle control and aim was just superb. I always thought he was really good. But I wasn't sure like what I'd never talked to him about his role either. But when someone's aim is that good, usually you want him to be the first guy in or the second guy in, because either you want him to open up the site or to secure the site.
Sure.
Through trading. So that's the way I think about it. He doesn't have to be first, but he needs to be a part of the entry squad, basically. Definitely not the clutcher. Do I think he got better? Not really. I think he's at the same level. Maybe he's just you're noticing him more because he's not sitting in the background getting kills anymore, like he used to do. But instead, he's in that. You're in the spotlight basically when you're an entry fragger, because if you succeed in entry fragging, you look like a god. But if you fail, I mean, your stats are just going to be terrible and everyone's going to trash you. So I think he's doing a good job as an entry fragger, and I don't think he would. I don't know. Honestly, if he's worse or better at an entry fragger than he was at the role he was at before.
He's much better. He's much better as an entry fragger. It's funny because remember the first time we really saw him was at the major, but the following one was an ESCA land, like one of the last ESCA lands. Yep. And the only reason he was entry fragging on that team is because he just stepped in for Steel and Days to a good guy. It was him and like Desi. So he just kind of came in and they were like, listen, this is the role we need you to do just because you're stepping in. And he just took it because he had no experience. He was very unknown. And he was like, all right, I'll do it. And he just bodied. Like he came in and like being an unknown entity just destroyed Fnatic in a best of 3 series. I mean, they lost the series, but he was individually fantastic. And then he gets picked up by Denial. They move to Liquid, and he decides he wants to be a lurker. And he kind of started. He had almost a year where it was just like, where's the guy we saw at ESCA land? Like, this is an underwhelming just everything out of him. And then Hiko joins and he gets back to that entry role because you can't take a lurking role from Hiko. And once again, he just went to this past pro league and bodied Fnatic again doing an entry on Cash. And he's playing really, really well in North America and he's improving and we're seeing growth. So it's just really funny to me that I think you phrased it well, Duncan. It's just like, what is this disconnect between North American players, like with the role they want to play and the skill set that they have? It's like they're trying to force, a circle into a square. Like, why is this happening?
I mean, here's the problem, because my reference point for where I first ever thought of that theory was actually with Nothing. Because when he used to be back in 1.6 and he was in that Evil Geniuses team, that was when Lurpus was the in-game leader. So I had access to not only watching him as a player and wondering what was going on, but then asking his in-game leader, why don't you use him in this way? Or what was his problem in this game? And basically what was always communicated to me was that Nothing's idea of what he wanted to do was, like I'm saying, like different to what if you looked as an outsider, what you'd want him to be doing. So likewise, Nothing's someone you'd want to be like second guy in or a guy playmaking and doing stuff early in the round. And instead, the way he really thought of himself was he wanted to be the guy who won all the clutches. Because in his mind, it's true, earlier in his career, he had just been this crazy fragger. And so for some weird reason, he'd got it into his head that that means you're not a complete player if that's all you do. As though you're like one-dimensional because all you do is entry and kill people with the AK and then you either win the whole round or you die there. So he thought to himself that to be like the best player, you had to be able to do everything. And so as a result, he purposely was forcing himself to want to do more passive stuff and to do this sort of clutch. He wanted to be like a Snax or like Neo in Virtus Pro where they just win 1v1s all day long. And the problem with that is, like, it's all well and good saying you want to do that. Yeah, sure, it'd be awesome if everyone could do everything, but odds are, especially for these sorts of players we're talking about, they're not the guys who have the natural, amazing game sense that those guys have, or they're not the smartest player and whatnot. I mean, I just as a joking analogy, I always give the analogy that if you're a guy who has like a 10-inch dick, then no one would really have any sympathy for you if you were like, oh yeah, I can't get many girls, and you were like, well, if you just tell them like you've got a 10-inch dick or you fuck them once, they're gonna know like you mean business. And they're like, no, but I want to be like the smart guy and the funny guy. I want to get them with my humor, and I want to show them like I'm really intelligent with jokes. And you'd be like, no, don't bother with any of that. Don't do any of that. Go to a party, see that groupie girl over there, just like pop her some Molly there. None of you girls anything. Shazam, you know nothing about this. Pop some of that in her drink over there, and just say like, listen, see this python down here? I do work, like, something like that, and then you will have no problems. And he's like, no, but I don't want to succeed. Like, you'd just be like, come on, man, like, life's dealt you an ace here. What are you doing? So you see the analogy.
Put it on the table.
Yeah, you see the analogy, Moses.
Absolutely. Gotta use your God-given talents.
Exactly.
Like Greg's Molly.
I don't know.
So what do you think, Moses, on this topic?
This conversation just got so awkward. Like,
yeah, it really did.
Just between 10-inch dicks and Molly, these guys don't know what's going on.
Well, I know that Hazed will never accept a drink from me at an after party. So
Yeah, absolutely not.
yeah.
The fuck?
Okay, Moses, what do you think on this topic, though? Because as a general point, I think it kind of applies. There are some NA players where, I mean, even with JDM, where you gave the example, let's say his rifles are good. I haven't seen them, so I can't comment in that sense because he barely ever buys the fucking gun. Let's say his rifles are decent. I mean, in that scenario, then he's the one holding himself back. Why isn't he using them more so that his are at the level of the other elite AWPers in the world, So even he's deciding in his own mind, I'm not going to do that aspect of the game. What do you think, Moses?
I'm trying to think of another player that it's blatantly obvious that they had like a role switch like Nitro, where they were like night and day in terms of their
when
actual...
they got better, you mean?
Or worse, or if like they said, I want to do this role and they switch to it, and I think it's like a bad switch and they play worse. Okay, or if they switch to a new role and play better.
Do you have one, or do you want me to suggest someone?
I mean, the best one I could think of is just off the top of my head. I'm sure there's a better one. It would be Tarek being deciding to be more passive and trying to be more of a team player. Like the fact when you said, Hayes, that he's the only one that you feel confident that's going to follow you through a smoke. I'm like, why is he following you? Why is he not the first one through it?
Because I would rather set up. I'd rather go in first, take the fire, like take all the heat of going into a site first, and give all the information to a player who I know is super highly skilled and can kill everyone almost 100% of the time with the information I give him, rather than have him run in first and give me the information. Like, I'd rather have him know where they're at so he can kill them.
Wouldn't you rather the higher skilled player who can probably make something happen for himself, and have you set up for some of the easier ones?
No, I
don't. You think that's?
I disagree.
No.
I'd rather have Tarek go in second.
With Tarek's skill set, you would rather have him living later on to play in a post plant situation.
If you think about it logically, usually the second guy in doesn't always live. If he lives, it's usually with low health.
It's got a higher chance. It's got a higher chance than the first guy through.
No, he definitely has a higher chance in living. That is a fact, 100%.
You know what the funny thing is about your team, Hayes, is I don't know if you've noticed this. This is something that I've often thought about CLG, is that when I've seen you guys have those big upsets, like for instance at Pro League 1 when you guys upset Fnatic on Mirage, it's not Tarek going off that wins the day. That was the match where you had like 29 kills. Like when you go off, the team generally has their biggest upsets and their best performance in mind.
You remember the map where you had 29 kills?
Go fuck yourself, Duncan.
I'm just repeating what he said. What do you think on this topic then? He's trying to make an observation about CLG as a team.
I mean, maybe there's some truth to it, but this could be pointing to the problem we were talking about, where like maybe I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay.
Maybe
to be fair, that's also the one map where you had Steel teach you guys how to win a game. I mean,
to be fair, we were already an amazing Mirage team before that. So,
okay. Here's the thing. In general, I actually think this is one of the. Okay, here's what'll sound weird. This is one of the ways I used to actually criticize Forest, which will sound bizarre because obviously in early CS:GO he was like a god. He was just wrecking everyone every LAN. But one of the ways I used to criticize him is when people used to compare. When the people used to talk about Get Right on the same team, they would always downplay Get Right because they'd say, "Oh well, you see, because he's the lurker, he's always going to rack up frags, you know. Because obviously, if you 1v4 and you just kill 2 and you save, you've got a positive ratio that you're gonna have awesome stats." But I used to say, yeah, but wait a second. Think to yourself, who in the world who's a pure lurker puts up numbers like Get Right? And at the time, there was no one. None of the lurkers were even close. And what's more, I said, yeah, but wait a second. Forest is extremely good. But actually, the role Forest plays, like second guy in after a pure entry fragger, is actually the best role if you're super skilled to get monster stats. Like that's where, if your entry fragger does a good job and your team throws some flashes, you're going to hit the 20-25 when you win the game. You know, you're just going to, because you've got the first opportunity every time to get the kills, and you're fighting people sometimes who aren't aiming at you, and they have lower health. You know, you have all the advantages as a fragger. So I think if you look at a lot of these players, so Shroud and Nitro, they do benefit from this. They are in that position where they rack up the kills that way. So what people I think are essentially trying to say, Hazed, is from the outside, obviously we don't know the inner dynamic. We look at Tarek and we go, why doesn't he just do the same thing?
It's not even like it's Tarek's choice, honestly. Okay. You know, we have a coach now, so our roles are, and everything we do is dictated by our coach. So, and that's not to push everything on him, because obviously before we had a coach, we had similar roles, and we had swapped roles with players before because we, you know, either someone was uncomfortable or they wanted to try something. As to what is going through Tarek's head, I'm not sure, but I can tell you what I believe is best for him, and I think it is second man in. Yes, it will be the highest, you know, stat role probably, because, you know, you're either killing weakened players or you just know where they're at.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously it's going to make him look better, but I think it's good for him. I think it's just good in general, because I'm okay with dying. Like I don't doesn't bother me.
Okay.
My problem is if I miss an easy shot, then I'm like, oh, that's when I know I messed up. Not when I run into a site and get instant headshot and I'm like, well, I mean, what can you do about that? Some players handle that better than others, and I think the role Tarek's in now is a good role for him. I think it's hard to say why he's not like performing up to the level that people expect of him. I don't know, other than he's almost being too team oriented at times. But I don't know if that there's any other players other than like Nitro and Tarek that you can give like good examples of that are like not in their, maybe not in their role that people think are ideal for them. Like I can't think of anyone else.
Duncan, it sounded like you had one.
Okay, here's the thing. It's not going to be a superstar, but I'll give you an example of someone where I think changing role made them way better. It's actually Semphis. Because here's the thing. I actually know from talking to Semphis that when he left Cloud9, he was kicked from it, let's face it, he didn't leave out a choice. When he left and he went to Neolum, he literally told me, like, I asked him, like, why were you playing way better, mate? Because actually his rifles got, like, way better. He was even, like, AWPing whenever he wanted. And he was actually getting, like, a lot of frags in that team, even though the team wasn't super good. People downplay it, though. At the end, they were shit, but actually they were one of the better teams early on. One of the things he told me was, he literally told me, because in that team, obviously, a bunch of those guys aren't super famous players. The team's probably not going to be the best. He said he just sort of came along and was like, I'm going to do everything I want to do. Like, I'm going to frag anywhere I want to do, and I'm going to take this role. And so the idea was he didn't have any team thought anymore. Like, in Cloud9, he was trying to find his role to cover up whatever nothing didn't want to do, or he was doing a role because Shroud's the star player, or Hiko's in this, every time there was always someone else he has to in some way accommodate, or he has to take a role to work with Sean for the tactics. So it sounded like he just switched to whatever he wanted to do, and I think it's not coincidence that he was way better as a fragger at the time. He obviously wasn't a superstar player, but he was much better than I think a lot of people thought he was.
Actually, that first season, I think he was like the top OpTic in the league that year, maybe second place behind Skadoodle. He was something outrageous with op kills.
What do you think of that example?
Statistically, he was the best player. Like, just overall, the whole season, he was the best player. He just went from, like, an okay player. I mean, like, I always thought Semphis was good, but he obviously wasn't, like, turning any heads when he was on Cloud9 to, like, very clearly being, like, the star player of Nihilum, at least within North America. So, I think you're right on most. Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Example I thought
truthfully, I don't know why it happened. Like, why he just suddenly got so much better, but he definitely did. Maybe Cloud9 was I hate saying this, and I almost say it as like a meme, but like they're like, players are being held back, they're being chained, like to like certain strategies and tactics within the team when they're not comfortable doing it. So
wasn't there a guy in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen who, like, was way better before Cloud9, went to Cloud9, everyone was like, well, he's dog shit, get the AWP out of his hands. Then he came out of Cloud9, he was fragging everyone, 25 kills half, baiting like a motherfucker, but baiting like a champ, getting those kills, putting those numbers up.
Sometimes it's not roles, but it's teams. Like, just the team, I guess the outlook on how you play just doesn't fit well with the team. Man, maybe ShahZam can give some insight into that.
Semphis on Cloud9 was kind of just filling whatever role needed to be filled. So it was pretty obvious to me why he started doing really well in Nihilum. It's not like Semphis ever lacked skill. He's just doing what needed to be done. And, some people are good at what they're comfortable doing because they did it a lot. They got good at it. And that's what, like, a lot of players are just good at what they're comfortable doing. Sometimes you have to make it work in a team setting. Like, you have to play a role sometimes, and you can't just make the players you want to make that you're good at, because it might be better to play as a teammate there.
Was that an issue for you in Cloud9?
Well, when I first joined Cloud9, we had no strats or anything. Like, we had X games within like a week or two since I joined, and we were dominating online. I was just running around. They just told me, do whatever you want. And that's all I did. Was I just fragged. Like, I just ran around, did what I wanted. I just told them what I did, and that's how it worked. But then we got to the boot camp in Europe. We were in Poland for a boot camp before the major, and by the first day we realized, like, this isn't going to work against structured teams. This isn't going to work against a Na'Vi. I can't just run around and try to get picks on them. Like, you have to play as like a team and oriented, and like, so we completely redid how we played during that boot camp. We made it super structured, and at some point it just became more like everyone was thinking about going through the process of doing the strats right, more than actually like winning the round. Like, the thought process was like, all right, we do this, now we do this. It's more about following through like the motions than actually like thinking like, we're playing CS, we got to win the round, in a sense, if you can understand what I'm saying.
Okay, so one team we haven't talked about that much, aside from when we talked a little bit of Nitro, is obviously Team Liquid. Just as I want to go around the table first and just check first of all, like, on paper, signing Simple was like this huge blockbuster move, and everyone was like, oh, they've won the NA shuffle, because they've got this player who everyone thinks is really, really skilled. But even though now they've also got Koosta as well, who everyone was kind of like in agreement, was like, oh, it's a great rising talent. But obviously, they don't have an in-game leader set at the moment, like somebody who's got a lot of tenure doing so. And the whole Simple thing, I mean, as good as I think he is as a player, obviously there's a big question mark as to whether he'll ever work in that team. Like, maybe he won't fit to the team, or maybe he'll just clash personalities. What do you think, Hazed? In 6 months, is Team Liquid the team who should be the best NA team? Will this team live up to its potential? What is your feeling for it?
On paper, yeah, probably. I would like to say us, but how we've been performing has been so terrible that I can't actually say that with a straight face. But like Liquid, on paper, yes. I don't know if they'll make it to 6 months, but if they do, then yeah, the skill level on that team's pretty insane. Hopefully they can all work together and there's, not like a big clash of egos that hold them back or anything. But yeah, I mean, 6 months. Yeah.
What do you think, Moses? Because here's the thing. I don't know how much you want to reveal of this, Moses, but you've been reasonably skeptical about Simple recently, right?
Yeah, I was pretty open about it on Richard's show. I mean, just my early returns on it was that it was a disaster in those first couple of weeks with him hopping. And for as many kills as he got, I haven't seen. It's been a long time since I've seen a player top frag so frequently for his team, but also be the cause of so many lost rounds for them at the same time. Okay. It's really, really interesting. But yeah, I think within that time frame, at some point they're going. I'm fully confident they'll be the best team, the best North American team. I'm not counting like the Brazilians, or I'm not counting Renegades in that. In terms of reaching their potential, I don't know if they will, because I have my potential for Liquid set, especially with the addition of Koosta, not on being the best team in North America. I have it set on them. They should be able to be competing with the top 6 to 8 teams over in Europe. I don't know if they'll reach that level, but definitely I think they're going to reach the best team in North America. They're the best North American team.
What do you think, ShahZam?
That roster on paper is like insane. Like picking up Koosta was really, really good for them. I think it really comes down to who's going to IGL. I really don't think any of the players on the team right now should become an IGL for the sake of being an IGL. I think they should get a proper coach that can lead the team as well. And that team has the capability to compete like internationally. There's all those players have tons of skill. You just need someone to like put them in motion. And like Simple, I think Simple might be a really good pickup. Like Moses is right. Like he plays like really reckless in a way, so it's high risk, high reward. But
I'm hoping
if they can make Simple work, like I think Simple as a rifler might even be better on that team than him hopping, considering how reckless he plays.
I do too, and I'm hoping that this is part of the fact that Simple hasn't been on a great, or hasn't been like on a team in a while, that he's playing like this, and that he's just been playing a lot of FPL, and those are the habits he's used to, and hopefully they get worn out of being in this team. But also, I'm also hoping that like he just came over and he was like, all right, I'm going to North America. I'm just going to be able to body all these people. I'm just going to be able to crush them, just run around and do whatever. These guys suck. I'm going to just stomp everyone. And I'm hoping that this was some kind of a wake-up call where despite everything, despite the performance of these teams, North America does have really talented individuals. And he can't just run around and do that FPL type stuff.
Yeah, if I can just jump in, I agree with you completely. I think that there's some misconception about like the skill level of North American players being lower. That's really not the truth. Because if you look like individually, if we can out aim someone, we definitely can. Our skill level is on par with European players. It's that we just don't work together as well as they do. That's the problem.
Well, also, it's the problem in this particular example because it's an unfair example. Like, to me, Simple was one of the best European skilled players. Like, it not obviously as a complete player, he hadn't put it all together and he hadn't been on very, very good teams. But just pure skill, for me, he was already as good as some of the amazing players in Europe. So it's unfair to like compare every North American to him because that's not the equivalent one. Like, if I was going to compare like good North Americans to someone, I'd say pick someone from like Dignitas, pick someone from G2. For sure, they're better than some of these players. It would be ridiculous to suggest that these players are all more skilled as well. But obviously, it's hard when you talk about Simple, because to me, the reason why he should be better than North American players is because he already in Europe should have been better than a lot of those players. It's almost an unfair, like you stack the deck against them if you're trying to imply NA shit because Simple's better than them.
Yeah.
So, okay, what do you think could hold the team back from being the best? What would be the flaw, do you think, that would stop them?
Simple. I think he's not only in terms of, one, obviously, we know his personality issues that he's had. And I think that's a big personality to have to adjust to. I think already, and I think actually the removal of a Dren, because was it you, Duncan, and Richard that had a bet that within like 5 months, you said within 5 months either Simpler or Dren's going to be gone?
I think
it
I
happened
said
like
that
a
about
week or
3
2
weeks
after
ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can already see if the fact that roster change happened so quickly just tells me that because they brought Simple over, that they're fully devoted to giving him a lot of space and a lot of control on this team. And that's good in the sense that they want to make it work, but also, one, they've never had a player of his caliber, so they have to find ways to work that into there.
Oh, did we lose him?
You've got a robotic, mate.
Two, all of a sudden, they're bringing
you're
Koosta
back
in.
again.
They just stick all these roster changes, and they've
Repeat point one again.
one is that they've never had a player of Simple. Yeah, 1.1 is that they've never had a player of Simple's category. Simple's level that they have to work into this system, and 2 is they have now an AWPer and Koosta. They've never had an AWPer that can impact the game the way Koosta can. So all of a sudden they have to find ways to work in these 2 levels of talent that they've never had to realize. So I think that's going to take an issue, and I think the in-game leader point is good. I think Hiko can get away with it in the interim when they go to the the major qualifier. But beyond that, I think they need to find some better long-term solution in terms of a coach that can call to them.
If you notice, Moses is like the number 1 cheerleader for Koosta, because he's done that thing where he's like, I know, I discovered this guy. I found it. He's so sick, man. So he's like riding this train the whole way, and he's just hoping that he goes all the way to the top, and then Moses can be like, I was there from day one. I was always thinking he was there. Do you think Koosta will actually be like okay, let's put it this way. In 8 months, will Koosta be like some monster, like top 3 NA player, superstar player? What do you think his level will be? Once he's settled in and he's played all the games and stuff.
Superstar player? I don't know, man. That's kind of pushing it. I think he's gonna be like, I think he'll be a stable, like top NA AWPer. Well, I just don't like the term superstar for him. Okay. I don't think he's gonna be a superstar. I think he'll be a star. I think he'll be amazing. He's gonna be beneficial no matter what team he's on.
He won't be as good as JDM though.
Come on.
What?
Why are you doing this?
Just asking. Just asking a question, brother.
I think he's
I'm not even dissing on JDM. I mean, maybe Koosta can be the best player in the world and JDM can be the second best. Second best is still pretty good, right?
Well, let's phrase the question this way: Can Koosta use rifles?
I don't know, honestly.
Same question.
I don't really watch him, so I don't know.
Okay.
But what I can say is he as good as JDM right now in terms of opping? I think JDM's better, and you'd be hard pressed to argue that based on who JDM has performed against versus Koosta. Koosta's performed against NA teams. That's fair, and he's done a really good job. But JDM has bodied like some EU teams individually. Like, we might have lost, but he played amazing.
Yeah.
So I think
he went toe to toe with Guardian a couple times.
Yeah, and I think Koosta's not there yet, but can he get there? I think he can. I remember at Fragadelphia, whenever, God, I don't know how long ago. Whenever we it wasn't Fragadelphia. It was
Went Out, right?
Went Out land. Yeah. Whenever we played enemy and we kind of bodied them, it was like it wasn't that close. They're a much better team now, that's for sure. I remember talking to Koosta afterwards. I said, like, I think you're actually really good, even though they didn't win. Like, I could tell individually he's super skilled. So I knew for a while he was going to be a good player. I didn't think he'd become this great of a player, but I knew he was a great player, and I think he'll continue growing for sure.
ShahZam, you've been known to pick up an AWP or 2 in your time. What do you think on Koosta?
Personally, I haven't watched him play a lot, but I do think he can end up being like one of NA star players as well. Like, considering how he's played against NA teams, you know how you think of NA stars, you think of Sky, you think of Tarek, you think of Shroud, Nitro. I think he could definitely be put up on the list there if he ends up like playing like people have been expecting him to. I think it's pretty obvious to say, like, you can't really say he's better than JDM or compare him in that sense, because JDM is a kind of AWPer where, I mean, he's performed against he's performed when you're supposed to perform against like the best European teams consistently. Like,
Yep.
and honestly, I'd love to see that from Koosta, but I think that I don't know if he will be the star of Liquid.
Sure.
Yeah, well, let me say this. I've never said that he's better than JDM at the moment. I think that he has the skills requisite to be. And I also think that going to Liquid is a really good situation for him, where he is not going to be in a position where he needs to carry people. Where he's when he's getting this experience at the major qualifier, when he's going to start getting experience against the European teams, he doesn't have to feel like he needs to go out and carry the way he did for Enemy. He can just kind of fill his role as an AWPer, and in that way he gets that experience and improve. And maybe 5 months from now, then in that role he starts just being a monster, and they start giving him more responsibility in terms of how they play the game. And I think in that way we can see him improve. I think that's a really good system for him to grow as a player.
So then really it's unfair because obviously JDM does have to carry people.
No comment.
Anyway, I got one more player I was thinking of in terms of like star players in NA who you probably wouldn't even think I would bring up, but it's someone I've always been confused about actually. So when ShahZam appeared on the map and had that ESEA finals, I think it was 17 was the one where Denial went ham and beat Cloud9 and all the rest of it. Yeah, ShahZam was one of the breakout stars of the tournament. He did super well. But the guy that everyone forgets about, the other guy who went crazy on that team was Naf. And actually, I remember watching that and being like, this guy's pretty good. And then I saw when he was over in Liquid in those early teams, and obviously those teams were a train wreck, those early ones. They were like having a lot of issues. But even in those teams, it's like he'd have like a map where he did some shit like that. And I'd be like, wow, this guy's actually a pretty good player. Admittedly, a lot of them online. And then in general, he had some that were like very troubled, and then they kicked him from the team, and I was like, well, I can kind of see why, like he had some bad lands or whatever. And it feels like throughout his whole career, he's never like evolved beyond that. Like he's never become some like star player. And I don't know why though, because I've watched a lot of his games where it's not that he goes off, but he'll have like the rounds or the glimpses where I'm like, that it feels like that could happen. Like the potential's there. I realize he's very young, but that alone can't be the excuse, right? At the end of the day, some people are complete players when they're young. So what do you think on this ShahZam? Obviously, you know him, you've played with him. What is his deal? What's the deal with Naf?
I like personally, I played with Naf for a long time, like even back in Denial and now, and like Naf has. I honestly, like, I think Naf is. He reminds me of Swag in a sense. Like Naf has insane individual skill. There are rounds 100% like where he just like takes over the round. You can't count a round lost with him alive, and it's a little bit of an inconsistency thing in that like Naf will have a match where he'll just take over completely. He'll be super aggressive. He'll just dominate, and then he'll have another one where he's pretty quiet. I can't say I know how to like where that comes from or how to figure that out, because trust me, if I knew, we would definitely put that into play to make him succeed as a star. I think it has a lot to do with like environment. Like if Naf is like mentally having a good time and like emotionally well or whatever, he seems to play better than when he's quiet, and I guess it's momentum based in a way. I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you have any opinion on this, either of you two?
I seem to remember. I think this is Naf. I heard around, I want to say March of last year, March or April, that he was actually planning on like quitting Counter-Strike, quitting competing.
Okay.
I mean, does he have like some kind of motivational issues? And I mean, maybe not now that he's like, you know, contracted and signed, but like, I always struck him as like, yeah, we saw the cool halves or the cool matches and then the glimpses, but just based off that information that I had from last year, I always figured it was just something in terms of his motivation into the game.
I wouldn't say it's personally like it's his own personal motivation, but like after that ESA land, season 17 land, we beat C9 and stuff. He's like, well, yeah, I think I'm gonna quit the game, and we're just like, what? Like he's like, I think I'm bored of it, but then he was just like, I joke about it back then, and he's just feeling like weird about the game, I guess. He definitely enjoys playing the game now. I don't really know what else to say about it though.
It's funny you bring up Naf, Duncan, because there's a different player on that team that confuses me as well.
Who's that?
And it's Rush.
Okay.
Rush is that player that I've always felt was like on the verge of breaking out to being like a pretty big star. He's like a high volume fragger. He has sick matches online. He's had really sick seasons. You think back to some of the seasons he had with Elevate, where he was actually absolutely insane. But I mean, he's another one of those players where it just seems like very up or down in terms of his production.
Right. for Rush, I could be wrong here, but from my experience with him, was like he's in that mindset we talked about earlier, where like he believes like if something doesn't go the way he thinks, they're scrimmers or something. Like they do something kind of crazy, he just dismisses it immediately, and gets kind of tilted at times. So that's my experience with Rush. Obviously, I've never played on a team with him, but just from playing with him here and there, that's what it feels like. But I mean, ShahZam would know more than I do.
I mean, I could definitely see where you're coming from. Like Rush definitely is pretty vocal. He'll get frustrated. Like if he dies in a way he shouldn't have died, or someone does something he didn't expect them to do, he will get frustrated. But over the course of playing with him and like playing with him in 10-mans before and stuff, he's definitely like come a long way up until now. I do think like this upcoming season and this year will be like a really big year for Rush. He's like lately in like practices and like as we've been playing as a team, he's like consistently been dominating, and I think he's gonna be one of the stars of our team. Him and Nav.
Okay. Does anyone need to go right now, by the way? Because I had like one more topic we could do, but if anyone has to go, we can shut down. No. Okay. So I had two more teams I was thinking of just to cover quickly, not like super in depth on every player, obviously. So one is that we all talk about Sean Gares as though like he's gone and he's retired. But technically he's a player again. He's come back. He's playing for this team that's Echo Fox now. Admittedly, not a team that you look at and you're like, well, put it this way, it has 0 NA star players right now. And even the players who are the role players are players who were role players a long time ago, or they were playing semi-pro. There's not a lot of talent there where it's fair to say like, well, will he just mastermind the whole thing and make them investing? Probably not. Probably doesn't have the tools to do that. But if he's this one good last great NA tactician, should we expect some like great impact on this team? Should this team be some sort of contender? What are your thoughts right now, Hazed?
Well, I think the reason Sean got away from like Cloud9 was, and it's something we talked about a little bit earlier, was like he was putting in all the work and doing all the research, doing all the tactics. It was just a huge burden for him, and as everyone knows, I'm sure he recently got engaged. So it's pretty clear that these things are like relate to him leaving Cloud9 and going over to like Echo Fox now, because he wants to take it a little more casually. Like he still likes the game. He just doesn't want to be the one doing all the work. It was just too much. The travel was too much. I can't blame him for what he did. So I don't think he's going to have the same impact as he had on Cloud9, because I don't think he's going to put in as much work, because this is kind of what he wanted. He wanted a more casual, type of environment.
Okay.
So he's going to have an impact, but not like he did on Cloud9 for sure.
Moses, what do you think?
Yeah, no, there's no way he puts in the level of work that he did for Cloud9. And that team just as a whole.
If they get into the Turner and he starts getting the competitive juices start going, and then, like I say, contracts become available, and Echo Fox could buy some, there's maybe an option upgrade. He's not going to get sucked back in.
I cannot imagine a world in which that happens, because I don't see that team really even outside of E-League. I don't see them competing at international events very often. Okay. I don't think they're going to. I mean, this is the thing. I've said this because I've had a lot of people ask me about Echo Fox, and I don't know what their dedication level. That strikes me as a team that's just put together to go to E-League because they got a spot.
Do you know what I think the way you could sum that team up is? It's actually a famous Notorious B.I.G. and Puff Daddy song. It's called Mo Money, Mo Problems. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Speaking of Mo, by the way, did you see his tweet to Sivo where he was mad at Sivo for putting a team in the Sivo professional division that hadn't ever competed? Did anyone else find that just really, really interesting, considering how they got into E-League? Because that team was put together like overnight. Like Rix was supposed to leave like 3 days after that team was formed to go to the minor with Complexity. Yep. And that's why Complexity had to back out, because Rick signed with Echo Fox. Like that team was put together immediately after Vegas when Mo was told, like, put a team together, you have a spot in E-League.
Okay. No, I certainly think that's quite hilarious that he was upset about that. Yeah, I feel like Mo's the sort of guy where he's used to getting things his way. Or complaining. Those are the two. That's the flow chart. Did you get things your way? Then things went the way they should have. Did they not go your way? Complain like a motherfucker. Okay.
Oh, he's an angel to work with in FPL. It's an absolute angel.
I mean, yeah, I like Mo a lot as a person, as a player. I think we all know that. I can't imagine a team with Mo on it while he's very skilled. I don't think they can actually practice enough to become like one of the best teams in the region or in the world.
I mean, you don't have to dislike someone to think that they wouldn't work in the game. I mean, listen, you know the famous movie The Mask? That guy seems really funny, really entertaining. I wouldn't want that guy to be hanging around me, though. It'd be really annoying. He's doing all crazy shit and fucking shit up all the time. Making jokes at people's expenses. I wouldn't want to be around The Mask. So enjoy the Mo show, but don't be part of the Mo show. That's what I'm basically saying. That's my philosophy on life as a pro player. So, okay, the other team I wanted to talk about is actually Complexity. And the reason why I want to talk about Complexity is because, believe it or not, okay, so since they've got Roker, who's a guy where he's had a little bit of a hype around him, mainly because of FPL and online stuff, etc., blah, blah, blah. That's certainly helped build his profile. And because people know now that he was someone that other teams wanted, but he'd already locked into Complexity really early on. And likewise, the other player, you might think, oh, people are looking at Fraud because he used to be a really good player. But like, let's face it, 10 years ago we're talking about here, like a long time ago. But actually, the player I wanted to ask about was the in-game leader, Shinobi. Because he's a guy where I don't watch the lower level of NA, so I know nothing about this guy. I haven't even seen any of his games. I haven't seen any lands, obviously. Who is this guy? Because I've seen some people comment, and when they linked me to some VODs, like I watched that game where they wrecked Team Liquid online, and actually it looked like obviously I can't know what he's calling, but it looked pretty good actually. I can't lie, it didn't look bad. So is this just like a bit of hype now, or is there something there? What do you think?
I've known Shinobi for a while, but I didn't know he's a strat caller. This is new as far as I know. I didn't.
He is on Complexity. He is on Complexity.
Yeah.
I don't think he was last season for Denial. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I've known him for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. I've never known him to be a strat caller. So I mean, this is actually news to me. I didn't know he was a strat caller for that team.
Okay.
So that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've always thought he was a decently skilled player, but I didn't know he was a strat caller.
This is his first season in professional as well, right? He hasn't been past Premier before the season. Yeah, I mean, first of all, that's a big responsibility, and then they must have had like some level of faith after talking to him that he would be able to do it. I will tell you that I have actually talked to him pretty frequently as it goes to since he got moved up to pro, since he signed with Complexity, and the first interaction I had with him was him messaging me on Steam and saying, hey, how do I download demos from last season of Pro League? And because he wanted to research, he wanted to start downloading all the demos of all the teams, and he wanted to start learning what teams do. He wanted to look at tendencies. He was highly devoted to the research side, to the strat building side, and like the learning about the game, which was really, really cool to see from a young player.
By the way, anyone who's watching this show right now, here's all you need to know, okay? Moses is looking for new prospects. He's looking for scouting new hype trains. So if you're someone out there who's got any sort of skill and aspiration, here's all you do, okay? Moses will forget that I said this, okay? You just message him and you're like, Mr. O'Toole, and he's like, well, you can call me Jason, you know. Moses, oh, sorry, sir. And then you say, actually, I always admired you as a pro player when I was a boy, and I feel like your analysis is excellent on desks. Could you please tell me how to break down demos? And he'll be like, this kid's got his head on his shoulders. He's going places. And it's like, he'll take you in like little Annie, orphan Annie, and he'll take you to the top, I reckon. So
no, but I mean, you make it into a joke, but like, when is the last time?
I know you really want people to do this. Yes, I'm telling kids, do this. He will love it. It will be great for him. Listen, Moses, I didn't want to break it to you, but none of these people care about you. I actually sent Koosta and this Shinobi guy to you. I said, listen, here's $50. I'll give you a stat track Dragon Lore. Just go tell this guy like he's good at. I know you don't know who this old piece of shit is, but tell him you like him on desks and stuff. Like, I didn't want to break it to you like this, Moses. It was for your birthday, mate.
I'm so glad I don't have my webcam up right now. You son of a bitch. No, but like that was pretty impressive to me, and I think it'll just be interesting to see how he develops. But I think the very, very early returns. I mean, let's be honest about what he did. While it looked cool and on paper that's a huge upset, and he beat a Liquid team that's still struggling to adapt simple, that just removed a Dren, who, we're going to see all those changes made. But, I mean, they took advantage of a really weak period of Liquid's lifespan.
Okay. Do you know anything about this guy, ShahZam? Do you give a fuck?
I've seen his name around. I didn't even know he's an IGL. I think it's pretty cool that he's putting the conscious effort into be in IGL, and like seems like he's putting the work in. There isn't a whole lot of that in NA. Everyone wants to be a star. So
can that complexity team actually do anything? I mean, they have 2 players who are like relative unknowns.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
All right, I honestly don't see that team doing anything. To be honest.
Why not?
Well, considering like the recent drama that was on Reddit and stuff, like at first it felt kind of weird that they would bring fraud in there. I don't know if it was a player's decision or if it was the org kind of pushing it onto them. I don't see a situation where an org pushing a change like that onto the team turns out good.
Sure.
I can say that Def has impressed me, at least in FPL.
Okay.
He was a total unknown. I didn't know what his skill level would be, and I mean, he although he does op a lot in FPL, which I don't think he does for the team because they have fraud. His skill level is quite high. So I've been pretty impressed with at least him. And I mean, if Shinobi's obviously a pretty good caller and putting in the work, I think they could be okay.
So here's the thing, young NA players, listen to me and heed my wisdom, okay? This is how you avoid Freakazoid, Simple, Stewie 2K type problems, okay? You don't just call people out and blast them, okay? What you do is you do it like Hazed. Hazed is smart, be like Hazed. What he essentially just told us there is, this deaf guy's a really good AWPer when he's online, but they don't let him AWP in his team because shitty old ass frauds in the team AWPing. So if they only just let this deaf guy AWP, I think we know what the problems are. See, Hazed is a next level trash talker. His burns, they're so subtle, but if you get them, it's just fantastic, you know.
I'm the passive aggressive asshole.
Okay, Moses, what do you think?
Yeah, I have questions about fraud. I have questions about everyone. I mean, I even talked to Henry today about
your
that.
teammate. Surely you have some insight for us.
Well, I just will say in the subject of someone who is a legend in 1.6, like that's one of the guys you can legitimately attach the status of legend onto. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Tara could argue himself as well, you know, but.
God.
Hey, one day I promise you I'll have Tarek on one of these shows, and I reckon I can unlock him, mate. I'll be like the 2 shots of tequila that it takes to really get that guy going.
God bless.
The Tarek Whisperer.
Yeah. Okay. Come on, Moses. Yeah, he's a legend. Sure, I agree.
I think the skills can come back, but I think the mental game is what is difficult to get back into when you're at this age. That's what I struggled the most with. That's what Warden struggled the most with when we played on Elevate a few seasons back. Yeah. That's what Fraud struggled with when he was on that Elevate team with us before, we dropped him for someone else. It's the mental game. It's not the actual talent in game. And in terms of the talent, I think he can get it back. It's going to take a little bit, but once again, it all comes down to how dedicated is he going to be? Is he going to be willing to, criticize himself and change bad habits or fix mistakes that he's making? And I don't think he'll be able to. Not because he's like mentally weak, but just because I don't think he's invested that much into it.
Okay, Hazed, since early, for the first half of this at least, Moses got to kind of like grill you guys and put you up against the wall and like demand answers and like, what have you been doing in this? What have you been doing with your time? Why weren't you doing demos? He got to like grill you guys about all your flaws and all your problems. I don't know if you know this, because Moses, he comes off very well on camera, right? He does a fantastic job of being a very amiable guy. He seems quite humble. He's always willing to take the beats.
Where are you going with this one, Duncan?
Are you ready? So here's the thing, though. What a lot of people don't know about Moses is he actually harbors dreams and beliefs that the only reason he didn't get really good in CSGO is he didn't really like have a proper team. He never really tried to be pro. So he actually believes, Hayes, that if he'd have stuck around and not become a caster, that he'd be a good player. So all I'm going to ask is, Hayes, have you ever played with Moses early on in CSGO, earlier in your career?
I did not play with him other than Tin Mans.
Okay,
I played against him frequently. I mean, he was...
No. Here's the question, Hayes. Here's the question for you, okay? This is a little gift for you guys before we end the show, okay? The question is, if Moses tried a fraud style comeback and he had the next 6 months locked in with an okay level team at like pro level, okay level team, he has 6 whole months to practice night and day, he's trying to get his skills back up to the level, do you think he could make it as an NA pro? Do you think he could make it?
Oh man!
And listen, Moses really likes it when people are honest with their analysis. Okay, he doesn't want to sugarcoat anything.
Outside of strat calling,
Okay.
no, there's no way. But if he was a strat caller, yes, I think he could.
Okay.
Because he preaches about watching demos so much. I'm sure he would be willing to put in the time.
So basically, Moses, you could be the FNS of his team. Now, ShahZam, what do you think? What could Moses make it if you gave him the 6 month? Yeah, sorry, too soon. Rest in peace, FNS. Now in TSM heaven. So, okay, ShahZam, come on.
I think after this,
You can't take it with you, mate.
He would definitely just like a support or a role player. He'd definitely be like a good asset to like an energy.
Yeah, he could be the Adren of energy.
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Support
be a
player on energy.
So,
What is
okay,
happening?
Moses, you could be a strat caller for, like, I don't know, some shit team, or you could be a support player for energy. I think in many
the
ways...
organization. You preach a big game. You seem like a guy who wants to watch 100 demos for us.
In many ways, they just burned you harder than I ever would, mate. They said he could be like
Sweet Jesus, dude.
a
This is
no-skill
unreal.
brain player, or just like a meat shield, basically. Okay, well, on that note, I feel like we have to start wrapping it up now. So, Hazed, any final comments, or anyone you want to thank for coming on the episode, or give a shout out to?
Duncan, I really want to thank you. You've really looked after us NA players the past
Do
few
my
years.
best.
Holy Christ.
I'm
Hayes,
motivating
really?
you guys, right?
Especially not Moses. Moses really hasn't done much for us,
No,
but
he's done
you
nothing.
specifically have done so much.
I'm looking out.
What the fuck is this, dude? This is unreal.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, ShahZam, you got anyone you want to say hello to or thank?
Just thanks to you guys for having me on the show.
Okay. Moses, any parting words, my friend?
Nah, dude, I'm fucking done. I was triggered at 8 a.m. this morning, and I'm just like, put me right back on tilt. This was an enjoyable conversation up until these past 5 minutes. It's unreal.
All right, on that note, I'll press stop.